Today I'm going to be showing you guys the bishop's opening. This is one of those lines that it's just full of so many traps. Like knight to f6 should be your favorite moves to see. And whenever they play knight to f6, we're actually going to play pawn to d4, not protecting the pawn on e4. Because if they take on e4, we're going to be taking on e5. And there's just so many ways in which black could go wrong here. For example, if they play bishop c5 thinking, okay, we're going to be taking on f7, that's already losing. Because we're going to play queen to d5, threatening a checkmate and attacking the opponent's unprotected knight. And if they take on f2, we're going to simply move the king, and the knight is now unprotected. So it doesn't really matter what they do. Once they defend against the mate, we take the knight, we win the game. If he moves the knight, he loses the bishop. Instead of bishop c5, you may see knight c6. But then if knight c6, the knight is still unprotected. So we sack the bishop on f7, and then after the king takes, we play queen d5, check the king, force the king to move, take the knight. The king is not able to castle, and white is winning in this position. They don't have to play knight f6 though. They could play knight c6. Now, if they play knight c6, we're just going to be playing the move knight c3. And you may see bishop to c5, leaving g7 unprotected. I like to play queen g4, targeting g7, and a lot of persons play queen to f6 because they defend g7 and they threaten f2. Now you're going to hit them with a surprise move, knight d5. Hit the queen, allow them to take on f2 with check, and then just move your king to d1. Because now you're threatening to fork, now you're threatening g7. If they defend the fork with the bishop, you take on g7, and they're going to be losing their rook. The only move that black could play here, because even if they play king to d8, they lose the rook. King f8 is the only move. After king f8, we're actually going to play the move knight h3 to attack the opponent's queen. And our plan here is to actually trap the queen. If the queen moves to d4, we play pawn to d3. And depending on their next move, we could play moves like pawn to c3, trapping the queen, winning the game. I want you to watch the full video. Apply everything that I teach, and your ratings will go through the roof. Kicking things off in the 500 region, today I'm going to be showing you guys the bishop's opening. Very, very aggressive. It starts with this move, bishop to c4, and there's a lot of different ways in which black could respond, but knight to f6 should be your favorite, because when they play knight to f6 and attack the pawn, don't protect the pawn. Just play pawn to d4, and we're actually starting our attack on move 3. Knight to c6 was played, and I'm actually thinking of just playing pawn to d5. Because if I play pawn to d5 and the knight moves to d4, pawn to c3 just traps the knight. Otherwise, I could just play knight to f3 and just develop my pieces normal. So based on what we learned though, let's go with pawn to d5, because he needs to be careful here. Knight to e7 is actually the only move that doesn't immediately loses the game. If he's trying to be smart and play knight d4, then he's lost. So he played knight e7, not bad. And then from here, we're trying to finish our development. But let me tell you a very cool move that I'm going to play. Again, this is the bishop's opening, pawn to d6. Like, you shouldn't feel uncomfortable with sacrificing a pawn. And I'm sacrificing the pawn so that way my bishop gets this diagonal pointing towards his king. Now I continue with my development normally. And again, notice, I'm still not protecting my pawn on e4. Okay, knight takes e4. Guys, we're down by 2 pawns in this position. Now I'm going to get my king out the center of the board. So we're down by 2 pawns. What do we have in return for being down by 2 pawns? Well, the guy's king is in the center of the board. It's going to take him at least 2 moves each to develop one of his bishops. And I already have my king castled. I already have 2 pieces developed. And it shouldn't be hard to regain back my pawns. Knight to f5 was played. And the whole idea in the, like, if you're going to try the bishop's opening, please pay attention to what I'm about to say. This knight on e4, which is unprotected, you should like to see that knight on e4, which is unprotected. Believe it or not, black just made a losing move. Why? Because now I'm able to hit him with queen to d5. What does this do? Not only am I threatening a checkmate on f7, I'm also attacking the unprotected knight. So now he has 2 options. Do I save my knight and let him checkmate me and end the game? Or do I prevent the checkmate and lose my knight? It's kind of a lose-lose type of situation. Well, the guy decided to save his knight. Welcome to the bishop's opening. But that's just a checkmate. More bishop's opening against 600 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 600, and again, I'm still going to be showing you guys the bishop's opening. Pawn to e5 and bishop to c4. This is the bishop's opening. So the opponent decided to respond with bishop to c5. So if you play the bishop's opening and then they respond with the bishop's opening, I like to play this move queen to g4 because it immediately targets their weak pawn on g7, and it's not the easiest pawn to defend. Like if they play something like pawn to g6, all of a sudden they're weakening the dark squares around their king. And if they play queen to f6, there's actually a very cool move here, knight c3, allowing them to take on f2 and then start some attack. But let's see what black does here. So queen to f6 was played, and as we said, oh wait, I don't think this is the part where we play. Nah, this is not the part, because if we play knight to c3 and then I think we need to play knight d5 and then allow them to take. If knight c3, he's just going to take, and then once I move, he's doing fine. So I'm actually going to play the move pawn to d4 first. And this is like thematic in the bishop's opening. Like we're always going to be sacrificing a pawn in order to gain a huge lead in development. And the purpose of sacrificing the pawn is, for one, it allows my bishop to be developed. But two, now that he takes with the bishop, I'm now able to play the move knight to f3, developing my knight, preventing him from taking on f2. And now that he plays knight to c6, now I should be able to develop my bishop, hit the queen. But then if I develop I need to be careful, by the way. I definitely need to be careful here. In fact, before I start doing anything, let me just get my queen off the same line as this bishop, because I'm not trying to blunder this game. And once I'm able to get my king castled before his king is castled, then I should be able to start my attack. But the guy's trying to castle his king immediately. Okay, I'm going to try to trap his queen. I'm going to try to trap his queen, actually. Like, if he castles his king, bishop to g5, queen to g6, knight to h4. Okay, the queen is actually not getting trapped. So let's just develop. Let's continue with our development first. We're down by a pawn, by the way. So the opponent decides to castle the king, and bishop to g5 hits the queen. We don't want him to play queen to d6. We want him to play pawn to d6. If he plays pawn d6, then bishop to g5 could trap the queen. Because then if he plays queen g6, knight h4, and then if he plays queen to h5, bishop e2, and the queen is trapped. So let's just use the time to get our king out the center of the board. And then if he plays pawn d6, we won the game. Haha. My fellow viewers, he played pawn to d6. I think the queen is now just lost. Like, bishop to g5 hits the queen. The queen has to go to g6. Knight to h4 hits the queen. The queen has to go to h5. Bishop to e2 hits the queen. Where's the queen going? The queen is trapped. Bishop, and that's the purpose of playing pawn to d4. Like, you guys are going to see this pawn to d4 very early on in the game, where it's just for us to immediately get our bishop out. Like, we could play pawn to d3, then get the bishop out. But if we play pawn to d3, then he gets a turn to develop a piece or make another move. But if we play pawn to d4, it immediately attacks his bishop. So then he had to respond to it, and then we continue with our development. So as we stated before, queen to g6, on the square for the queen, hit him with knight to h5. The queen is not able to get to any of these squares. So the queen now has to go to h5. But then bishop to e2, it's also being guarded by the knight on c3. And just like that, 10 moves into the bishop's opening, and we're already winning the game. So queen to h5, as we predicted, bishop to e2. Now the queen just has nowhere to go. The queen is just trapped. Oh. Okay, bishop to g4 is actually a move. I didn't see that move, but it's still winning. I do not trap the queen though, but it's still winning. If I take the bishop with the bishop, he's gonna take my bishop. If I take his knight first, he's gonna take my bishop. So I kind of have to take with the queen. But we're not just ahead by an entire piece, so we're still winning. Thought I was winning the queen though. So he took with the queen. Let's just take. We're now ahead by a piece, which means from here the goal is to start trading more pieces off the board. Rook to d8 was played, not bad. He's trying to get his rook in the game. I'm thinking of playing knight to d5 because my bishop is on the same line as his rook. And again, I'm trying to trade pieces off the board. And playing a move like knight to d5 in this position, this is basically PP on the PP. Because the knight is pinned, we're now applying pressure to the pinned knight. And it doesn't mean I'm going to be winning the knight, by the way. Like, there's a lot of ways to defend against this. There's rook to e8, there's pawn to f6. Okay, he decides to play bishop to b2, and that has to be losing. Because, first of all, I have two pieces attacking his knight. What if I just take the free knight and fork his rook? He takes my rook, I take back the rook. And then once he moves the rook, I take his rook. He's just going to have a rook on the board. I'm going to have a rook, a knight, and a bishop on the board. So I can also move my rook, then take the free knight. But let's just take the free knight from now. Because I had two pieces attacking the knight. He only had one. Now we take. Both of his rooks are now forked. Which means, yes, he's able to take my rook. But I'm just going to take back the bishop. Because his rooks are still forked. Once he moves away one of the rooks, I'm just going to take the other one. And we're just going to be ahead by two pieces. Okay, pawn to f6 was played. He didn't move any of the rooks. And because he didn't move any of the rooks, we're not necessarily in a rush to take any of the rooks. So let's just play the move bishop to e6 check and just force the opponent's king to move. And then I should be able to also play knight f5. But let's just play rook to b1 here. I'm just trying to get as many pieces in the game as possible. Like, this is just completely winning for white. Now that... Oh my god, I think I just blundered. Okay, I have to take the rook. I have to take the rook. He needs to take this bishop. If he takes this bishop, which he did, my bishop could be getting trapped. Okay, that was bad. That was actually bad. That was bad. Luckily, I'm ahead by two pieces. But let's just take on b7. I'm going to be losing the bishop. I'm going to be getting a lot of material for the bishop, though. For example, first I'm going to sack the bishop because it's trapped and I'm going to lose it. So let's just take on g7. And then once the king takes, I'm going to use the time to play knight f5 to check the king again. And then once the king moves, I'm going to be able to take one of his pawns. And I'm still ahead by 4 points. But he decides to play the move king to e6, which means the king has nowhere to go. And I am able to check the king, which means that's just a checkmate. More bishops opening against 700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 700 and we're going to be playing more bishops opening. Bishop to c4. Our favorite move to see in this scenario is knight to f6. Let's see what this guy's going to come up with. Knight to f6 was played. We saw the favorite move. Whenever they play knight to f6, hit them with pawn to d4. Remember, you want them to take on e4 because the knight becomes unprotected. And we already see a lot of the tactics that could happen with that unprotected knight on e4. Whew. Pawn to d5. Counter-attacking move. It's definitely a new move. I mean, okay, I could take the pawn. He takes my bishop. I trade the queen. I take the knight. But that's going to be... I think I'm going to be ahead by 1 pawn or so. Let's just take on d5 here. And my plan from here is to try to castle as quickly as possible. Now, if he takes with the knight, though, he could be in trouble. So he plays pawn to e4. Okay, that's interesting. Which means... now he's threatening to take on d5. And because he's threatening to take on d5, let's just play the natural knight to c3. Now I have 2 pieces guarding d5. He has 2 pieces attacking d5, which means I'm already ahead by a pawn. Bishop to b4 was played. You see, this guy's planning. Like, he wants to take on d5, so he decides to pin my knight. So once his knight takes on d5, I'm not going to be able to take due to the pin. But how I'm going to be countering this is I'm also going to be pinning his knight. So that way, now his knight is not able to take due to the pin. And then he gave up his bishop for a knight. Let's take on c3. I'm still ahead by a pawn, by the way. But I'm not sure how long I'm going to be able to be ahead by this pawn. Pawn to h6 was played. Now, if I pull my bishop back twice, he's going to simply take on d5. So this is one of those situations where we're going to be giving up our bishop for a knight and then play knight to e2. So that way we're able to just finish our development as quickly as possible. And what I could say about this is I managed to get an extra pawn coming out of the opening. So bishop to g4. I was expecting him to play bishop to g4 because he's kind of very aggressive. He comes off to me as a very aggressive player. Let me just get my king out the center of the board. So that way I know I'm safe. And then once he castles his king, I'm going to play a very cool move in order to break the pin. Like, this pin is actually a bit uncomfortable. So I'm actually going to play the move queen to b1, attacking the unprotected pawn. So basically I'm forcing him to react to the fact that, hey, b7 is under attack. So he's probably going to play something like pawn to b6. And then I'm going to be able to play knight g3, targeting his unprotected pawn on e4. So he did play b6. Let's go knight g3. Let's hit the pawn on e4. Okay, and then he plays knight d7. He's either very aggressive or he's just not watching what's happening. Because that's another free pawn. I'm now ahead by 2 pawns. His queen is under attack. Like, I could now confidently say white is just winning here. Okay, queen to f4. Was expecting some aggressive move like that. My knight is under attack. Like, I want to play rook e1, but he's obviously going to play rook e8. So let's just play bishop to d3. Let's guard the knight like this. Yes, I'm leaving d5 unprotected, but there's nothing attacking d5. And I'm also trying to get my queen somewhere more active. Maybe to b3 or b5. You know, it's good to have your pieces pointing towards the opponent's pieces. So he decides to play rook to e8, which means he's adding more attackers to my knight. Okay, fine. Now I'm going to play rook to e1, guarding my knight. So he has 2 attackers. I have 2 defenders. He has 2 pieces on my half of the board. Now he plays knight f6. He added a 3rd attacker. Yo, this is the most aggressive 700 I've seen. Let's just take on f6. I mean, I'm the one who is ahead by a pawn, so I'm fine with trading pieces here. And now he has to play queen takes because, okay, nobody's going to choose to take with the pawn and give themselves double pawns. And then after he plays queen takes, I'm finally able to connect my rooks. We're not going to be taking on e8 because remember, to take is a mistake. It's best to let them take. So I'm going to play queen to b5. Now I have 2 pieces attacking his rook on e8. And then if he takes on e1, I take on e1. And then my rook has the open file. And then his rook is not active. Yo, the guy played pawn to a6. This is actually checkmate in 2 moves. Like, I literally just need to take his rook with check. His rook takes, and then my queen takes, and that's mate. But because I like to be fancy, I'm going to choose to play the move queen takes rook with check, sacrificing my queen. Keep in mind, my bishop prevents his king from running. His rook takes, which means that's just a checkmate. More bishops opening against 800 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 800, and we're going to be playing some more bishops opening. Let's hit him with bishop to c4. Knight to f6, our favorite move, by the way. Let's play pawn to d4 here. And again, we do not care if they take on e4. This is what we want them to do. Bishop to d6 is definitely a weird move. Like, he didn't take, but he decided to guard the pawn. It breaks principles, though, because for one, I'm going to be forcing him to move the bishop more than once. But he's also blocking in his own bishop. So do we take the bishop? Do we take the pawn? And then after the bishop takes, play knight to f3? Or do we just play immediate knight to f3? I like the idea of playing immediate knight to f3 because still, if he takes with the knight, I'm able to take on e5 and hit the bishop. But if he takes with the pawn, pawn to e5 is a fork and I'm winning the bishop. Now, he is able to play knight c6 or queen to e7, so it's not like he's gonna lose material here. Well, I'll take that back. He's going to be losing some material here. Because h6 didn't really do anything. I mean, I'm attacking e5 twice. He's only guarding it once. So not only did I just win a pawn, I'm also forking his knight and his bishop. Which is why he decides to play pawn to b5. He's basically saying, if I take his knight or his bishop, he's going to take my bishop. But this is just a fork. So I'm just going to take on b5. That's more material. It doesn't mean he's escaping from the fork. Like, guys just lost here. So he took on e4, and okay, the plan was to take the bishop. And by the way, queen to d5 is another fork, like, because the rook is unprotected. But let's first take the bishop. And if he does anything weird, he's going to be getting forked again. Okay, he took with the knight. That was not anything weird. My bishop is also under attack, so let's just pull the bishop back. Let's get the king out the center of the board. And we're just going to be playing the chess game ahead by a piece. So he castled his king. I'm also going to be castling my king. And then he develops his bishop. Like, I mean, he's down by a piece, but he's developing. He's castling his king. Let's also develop. I need to also develop my bishop, play queen d2, and then I'm going to sacrifice on h6. That's my plan. Once all my pieces are developed, then we're going to be going for the attack. So pawn to a6 was played. Doesn't do anything, by the way. The guy's not even developing. Let's go bishop to f4 here. All our minor pieces are developed. We have our pieces also pointing towards the opponent's king. Knight to c6 was played. He's finally developing. Now we hit him with queen to d2. And, you know, this is not only going to be happening in the bishop's opening. I want you guys to pay attention to the sacrificial idea. If you have a bishop, like a bishop and a queen battering towards this h6 pawn, and your bishop is on d3 pointing towards h7, especially if they do not have a minor piece like a knight guarding the h7 square, it's going to be very dangerous. But it looks as if he saw it though, because he played queen to f6. So now if I takes and he plays queen or pawn takes, then I'm no longer winning. However, I'm going to be able to hit him with knight to d5. This is me trying to remove his queen from guarding the h-pawn, so that way I'm able to sacrifice. But all my pieces are now just active, so this is just me attacking, to be honest. Like, the only pieces that I have that is not doing anything are my rooks. So if I had a rook on d1 and a rook on e1, then all my pieces are going to be in the perfect position. Not only am I attacking his queen, I'm also threatening his pawn on c7. And if I take his pawn on c7 and attack his rook, then his knight on d6 could be hanging. All depends on where he puts the queen though. So he took on b2. We kind of wanted that, to be honest. Like, there's a lot of ways to win this game, by the way. Like, the first one to win is to take the knight, so that way the knight no longer guards the bishop. Play rook to b1, this is a skewer. And then once the queen moves, we take the bishop and we're winning. Another way to win is to play knight takes c7, attacking the rook. And once the rook moves, we take the unprotected knight, and that's also winning. I mean, sacrificing should also be winning. So let's go for the sacrifice. That's like the fanciest way to do it. So we sack, takes, take. And the good thing is, he's not even able to play something like queen to g7 and defend the mate, because knight to f6 check is going to be a checkmate. So he naturally didn't accept the sacrifice. He played knight to d4 instead, which means my knight on e7 is under attack, but I'm about to set up something fancy. This is going to be the fanciest mate. Like, if you're able to find a force mate here, then you have some potential. But here's what I'm about to do. First of all, well, this is also just losing. Like, I could take the knight once the queen takes bishop h7 and I'm winning the queen. But we're going for the guy's king. So knight to e7 check. The king has to go to h8 because the bishop covers this diagonal. Once the king moves, we sacrifice our bishop with check. The king now has to take, then queen to g5 is a check. The king is now forced to go to h8, and then queen to h6 becomes a checkmate. So let's play knight e7 check. The king moves to h8. Now we play bishop takes g7 check. All of this is forced, by the way. Like, there's literally nothing else that is there to do. He has to take my bishop. Once he takes, we play queen to g5 check. The king now has to go to h8. And that's just a checkmate. More bishops opening against 900 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 900, and we're going to be playing some bishops opening. So after e5, we're going to be hitting him with bishop to c4. And again, knight f6 should be your favorite move, because whenever they attack the pawn on e4, we don't guard the pawn. We play pawn to d4, allowing them to take the pawn because it's very dangerous and they could just lose the game immediately. So he decides to take on d4 instead. Whenever they take on d4, just play knight f3 and develop. Like, the whole idea of the bishop's opening is to develop your pieces before them, so that way you're the one who is attacking. Now, knight c6, he's trying to guard the pawn, but our intention is not to win any material or anything. Let's get the king out the center of the board. Bishop to c5 was played, and a part of me want to play pawn to e5. And then if he plays pawn to d5, I go bishop to b5. Another part of me just want to play pawn c3 and then just use the development that I have and use it as an advantage. And that's what I'm going to do. Let's play pawn to c3. And again, I'm trying to have a lead in development. If we have more active pieces than the opponent, for one, the position is going to be easier for us to play. It's going to be harder for them to play. And there's going to be a bunch of tactics. He plays pawn to d5. It's an interesting move, but not in a good way, because my king is out the center. His king is still in the center. And he's the one who is volunteering to open the center. So, hey, let's just take the pawn on d5. My rook is going to slide over to e1 so fast, and he's going to be under attack now. So he took with the knight, and before we even take back this pawn, let's play the move rook to e1, checking the opponent's king. Like, if you're ever able to check someone's king with your rook, then in the center of the board, then there's something that they did wrong. So now that the bishop decides to block, Like, I want to take on d4. I think that's the obvious move. But what if I play bishop to g5 first and attack the queen? Let's just take on d4. Now the position is equal, and I'm the one who is attacking. So my opponent is not forced to move the bishop. I'm assuming he's going to pull the bishop all the way back to e7. And then from here, I'm going to just try to develop my pieces and gain some attack on his king. So he decides to play bishop to b4, counter-attacking my rook. So that's not a bad move. And from here, I'm going to play knight to d2. Like, I could have played bishop to d2, but my next move is going to be pawn to a3. And if he gives up his bishop for a knight, then I'm going to be the one who is using the bishop to attack him. He needs to use this opportunity to get his king out the center of the board. So the king is castled, his king is safe. Let's play pawn to a3, hit the bishop. And now he needs to pull the bishop back to e7. I think he should have pulled the bishop back to e7 from the first chance he get, to be honest. Okay, putting the bishop on d6. It's not really the score for the bishop, but it's fine. Like, the guy's king is castled. All his pieces are developed. Like, my bishop is not yet developed. So let's go knight to e4. It's not just to hit the bishop, but I'm also trying to develop my bishop. And I'm assuming he's not going to move the bishop, but I may not take the bishop. I'm trying to keep as many pieces on the board and point them closer towards his king. Okay, he pulls the bishop back to e7. That bishop has been moving a lot, to be honest. I'm not gonna lie. I'm trying to figure out which one of my knights I should put on g5. And I'm actually gonna use this one. I'm gonna play knight to g5 to attack this bishop. I have some ideas of playing queen to h5 and threaten a checkmate on h7. And what I would love for him to do is to give up his bishop for a knight. So if he takes, I'm probably gonna take with my bishop so that way I gain the tempo on his queen. But okay, taking with the knight is also fine. Just a simple bishop to f5 as black in this position should be good enough. But he plays pawn to a6. That has to be an inaccurate move. That had nothing to do with the position. And he's allowing me to take his bishop. So I have two options. Okay, I actually only have one option. Like, I was planning on playing queen h5, then I take. But if I play queen h5, there is bishop f5. So let's just get rid of the bishop. And then once he takes, we finally have a target that we're going to be using. So we're not going to be targeting his e6 pawn. This is now a weakness. But I also have a weakness on d4, so I need to ensure that I don't lose my pawn on d4. Let's just play the move pawn to b4 here, so that way I can play bishop to b2 if I need to guard the pawn. I can play knight c5 to hit b7, hit b6. He plays pawn to e5, and that's actually a blunder because, for one, my bishop was always on the same line as his king. And it means his knight is now pinned, and then automatically I'm able to take on e5, and I'm now putting pressure on his pinned knight. Like, he immediately take back with the knight, but I guess he doesn't know that it's losing. But I have two pieces attacking his knight. He's only guarding it with the queen. So let's just first take the knight with check, forcing the king to move, and then I'm going to be developing my bishop, attacking his unprotected knight. So he moves the king out the way. Now we play bishop to b2. All our pieces are active. We're ahead by a piece. If he plays pawn c6, maybe I'm going to take the knight and then just trade. Like, pawn c6 looks like it's the best move though. I could have also taken on b7 because that was an unprotected pawn and then just trade. So yeah, he found pawn to c6. Now I'm just going to trade. Like, I'm the one who is ahead in material anyway. So yes, he's going to take my bishop, but I'm going to take his knight. And then once he takes, the question is, do we move the knight or do we play queen to g4 and first threaten a checkmate before we move the knight? I think that's what I'm going to do. Okay, that was weird. He played c6 in order to take my bishop, and I think he forgot to take the bishop or something. But that was weird. Now I'm ahead by two pieces, which means first I'm going to take this bishop. First I'm going to take this bishop. And then once he takes back the bishop, because my queen is under attack, it gives me enough time to pull my bishop back. Now I'm ahead by two pieces. It's just that easy. Trade the pieces off the board from here and win the endgame. Okay, he's doing the right thing. He's not trading because he's down in material. That is the right thing to do. Now I need to connect my rooks. So let's just move the queen to h5. I'm also putting my queen on the same line as his king. So he needs to be careful about some checkmating ideas coming in. And in a lot of cases, I'm thinking of just playing rook to d1. I mean, my rook is my least active piece. The rook is not doing anything. And if I could get this rook to a 7 rank, then take on h7, that should just be winning. Okay, pawn to f5 was played. He attacks my knight. The thing is, though, the pawn was covering the g5 square. It no longer covers the g5 square. So once I hit him with knight g5, I'm now threatening to just end the game. So if he does not play queen to c7 here, like right now, the game is over. He has to find queen to c7. He didn't find queen to c7. He played pawn to c5, which means that's just a checkmate. But more bishops opening against 1,000 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,000, and we're still playing the bishop's opening. Pawn e5, we go bishop to c4, and knight c6, bishop c5, knight f6. These are the usual moves. Whenever you see knight f6, just immediately play pawn to d4. Like, this is actually the most fun one to play whenever they play knight to f6, because they could actually lose the game so easily and so early. For example, knight takes e4, it's not losing. I'm not going to say this is losing, but it's very easy to make mistakes with that unprotected knight on e4. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to take on e5. This is the bishop's opening. You can learn it on chessreps.com. Bishop to c5. And that's the first mistake. White is winning. Black is completely losing because the knight is unprotected. The knight is the main defender of this bishop, which means once we play the move queen to d5, we are at least winning a piece in this position. So the opponent, he was like, okay, fine. I'm going to lose my knight. Let me just get my king out the center of the board. So let's just take the knight. Maybe he thinks pawn to d5 is going to regain back his knight, but I have 2 pieces on the square. Because maybe he thinks if I en passant rook to e8 wins my queen, but let's see what he's going to come up with, because this is just winning for white. So he played rook to e8 first, which is also a mistake. But I don't want to be greedy. Like if I'm trying to win a pawn, due to this unprotected bishop on c5, I should be able to sack the bishop. Once the king takes, I play queen d5. Once the king moves, I take the bishop. But I don't want to only have my queen doing the work. I want to ensure that all my pieces are doing something. So, okay, there's also bishop to d3. But he should be able to play g6. So let's just play knight to f3. We're ahead by a piece. Let's just get the rest of the pieces active. Let's quickly get the king out the center of the board as well. And then we're just going to continue with our attack. So pawn to d6 was played. Very natural move. Like if I takes, I lose my queen. Definitely not going to take though. Now the question is, do we play knight g5 threatening mate, or do we play bishop to d3? First of all, knight g5 is a blunder because there is rook takes e5. If I play bishop to d3, there is also pawn to f5. So let's not be too greedy about the situation. Let's not try to win too quickly. I also like the idea of bishop to g5 because it just develops one of my pieces. And he's going to be forced to play queen to d7. And then I castle my king. But let me just start by castling my king. Now I'm just never going to be scared of getting pinned or anything like that. Now he took the pawn. Okay. Now we play knight g5. Now knight g5 is completely winning. Why is knight g5 completely winning? Because both his f7 and his h7 pawn is weak. And I've been saying this a lot. When it comes to attacking the opponent's king, always try to attack the pawns around the king. If we hit him with the move knight g5 here, we're not only threatening h7, we're threatening f7. So if he plays g6 thinking he's guarding h7, we take on f7. And if he plays a move that guards f7, we take on h7. This is GG's. So he plays g6, and do we take with the bishop with check, pick up the rook, or do we take with the knight, force the queen to move somewhere, and then play a discovered attack? So let's say we take with the knight and attack the queen. If the queen moves here, we win the queen. If the queen moves here, we win the queen. If the queen moves here, we win the queen. What if the queen moves here? Let's just take on f7. It's a harder position for him to play, and I'm still going to be able to win the rook anyways. Like if the queen moves to d4, I think that's the move for him to not to immediately lose. But I should be able to play knight d6, discovered attack on the king. Once the king moves, we trade the queen, then we take the rook, and we're going to be ahead by like 5 points. Okay, I forgot to look on queen to f6, but should not be an issue. Like, I'm thinking about playing bishop to g5 here. Like, first of all, the move that I'm gonna play is knight d6 to win the rook. But I'm trying to see if he's able to put his queen on a square where my knight is able to get a discovered attack on his queen. So let's play the move bishop g5, developing the bishop, gaining a tempo on the queen. Okay, now I think he needs to play the queen to b6. Ooh, bishop to f5. e5, counterattack the queen. So if I take his queen, he takes my queen. Can I mate him though? Knight d6? Check. There's always going to be king to f8 though. That's the thing. Like, 5 points of material is guaranteed, but I'm trying to take more. What if I play queen takes b7? His queen is under attack. The unprotected rook is under attack. I'm threatening discovered attack on his king. This is GG's. Let's just take the free pawn. So, worst case scenario, we take this rook, or we discovered attack and take this rook. Okay, so he finally decides to play queen to b6. And as we mentioned before, taking the queen followed by knight d6, that's 5 points of material. But what if we take the rook? If we take the rook, he takes on b2, we still take his rook. We're going for the rook. We're taking everything. Now we're ahead by 9 entire points. Okay, I think he needs to take on b2, but if he takes on b2, I should be able to move my knight and connect my rooks, and he's not going to be winning anything. So knight d6, king f8, grab the rook. He takes my rook, I take his knight. Yeah, that's just too much points of material. There's also knight d2, but I don't want to give him any time to like move his king out the way. So let's just play knight d6. This is called a discovered attack, by the way. Notice how moving my knight out the way allow my bishop to check his king. The king now has to go to f8. And I'm assuming he's also trying to protect his rook. If the king moves to h8, bishop to f6 is going to be a checkmate. So he moves the king to f8. Bishop h6 is not mate. There is king e7. So let's grab the rook. We're now ahead by 13 points. If he... Okay, he take back. I was about to say if he takes my rook, I take with check, but he takes back. And... Okay, I have another idea. That idea is to leave my rook hanging, play queen to d5, and attack his unprotected bishop. Because if he takes my rook or try to save his bishop, queen to f7 is going to be a checkmate. This is where the game ends. Okay, he moves the queen to d4, not taking the rook, saving the bishop, but that doesn't help, bro, because that's just a checkmate. More bishops opening against 1100 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1100. Let's play some bishops opening. So e5, we go bishop to c4. This is the bishops opening. We're going to be seeing knight f6 is one of the ways to do it. Whenever we see them play knight c6, I like to just continue by playing knight c3. And then if they play knight to f6, we don't play knight to f3 because knight takes c4 is good for black. Instead, we play pawn to d3. And the whole idea is we actually don't want the knight on f3. We want the knight on e2 so that way once we castle the king, we're able to play f4. And that's the whole plan. So pawn to d6 was played. Let's get our king out the center of the board. And now we want to either play f4 and then play bishop g5 or just play immediate bishop g5. Okay, bishop to g4, that's not one of the moves that I'm used to. Like, I don't see what's stopping me from just playing pawn to f3 and attacking his bishop. Okay, maybe he wants to take. Yeah, that's kind of a weird move. Let me start by developing my bishop, actually. Now, all my pieces are developed. If he takes my knight, I take with the knight. But if he takes this knight, I take with the pawn. And he won't be able to apply pressure to the pinned knight. Okay, that's his idea. He plays immediate knight d4 to apply pressure to my pinned e2 knight. But now I'm able to play f3. Because now the bishop is no longer pinning my knight. And the bishop is not on c5. And because the bishop is not on c5, I'm very safe here. Okay, he took on c3. Why did he take on c3? He's giving up his bishop for a knight. If I take with the pawn, then he plays knight takes and I play queen takes, and then he moves the bishop. And also, if I take with the knight, he's still gonna move the bishop. What if I take the bishop though? What if I take the bishop? If I take the bishop, maybe he's gonna take this pawn actually. Okay, let's just take with the pawn, and we're going to be allowing the trades because my bishop is pinning his knight. So at the end of all these trades, I think I'm going to be the one who is pinning him, and his king is not yet castled. So he took, let's take back. He has to move the bishop back to e6, and I want to play f4. Okay, bishop back to d7. Bishop to e6 was way better. Now we play f4, and the goal is to apply pressure to the pinned knight. We don't really have any more pieces to apply pressure to the knight. And that's the whole idea of f4. Once we play f4, for example, this is actually losing for black because he castled right into a weak position. Once I take, the knight is pinned, the rook is applying pressure to the pinned knight. This is all I need. Because once he takes back, I'm not even going to take the knight. Like, I can literally take the knight whenever I want. I prefer to apply as much pressure as possible to that pinned knight. So let me start by playing the move queen to e1. Why queen to e1? I'm trying to play queen to h4 and apply even more pressure to the pinned knight. So whenever you're pinning a piece, you want to apply pressure to that pinned piece. But not just one piece. If you can only apply pressure with one piece, then that's fine. But the more pressure you apply to the pinned piece, the more dangerous it becomes. And then he plays pawn to b6, which did completely nothing. So now we play queen to h4. We have 1, 2, 3 attackers on his pinned knight. He has only 2 defenders on his pinned knight. This is peak PP on the PP. So he decides to play pawn to h6. But that's fine first. I was actually thinking of sacking my rook, but if I take the rook, with the rook, he's actually going to take my bishop. So let's just take with the knight, with the bishop. And then once he takes, I should be able to take one of his pawns. The question is, which one do we take? And the answer is actually with the rook. I am currently threatening to checkmate his king in 2 moves. If you're able to see the mating tool that I'm threatening, you have some potential. But hint, my bishop is on the same line as his king. And what do we know about pin pieces? Pin pieces does not protect. If you're able to find checkmating 2 in this positions, you have some potential. But here's the mating tool. After king to g7, we have 2 pieces targeting h6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take on h6 with check. The king is going to be forced to move to g8. And then rook to g6 is going to be a checkmate. The pawn is not able to take because pin pieces doesn't protect. So let's take on h6, check. He moves the king, and that's just a checkmate. More bishops opening against 1,200 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,200. Let's play some more bishops opening. Now, after e5, as we said, we hit them with bishop to c4. What will we see? Knight c6, knight f6, maybe even bishop c5 here. Pawn c6 was played. Now, whenever you see pawn c6, it means they want to play pawn d5. So from here, we're going to play the move knight c3 just to control the d5 square. And now knight f6 is played, which means pawn to d5 is more than likely going to be their next move. Now, what I'm going to do in order to combat this is I'm going to immediately play pawn to d4. It's kind of like the same idea whenever you see knight f6, play pawn d4. But if they take, I am able to develop my queen early, because now once I develop my queen early, there's no knight coming to c6 to immediately attack my queen. So my position here is in fact very active. And then the opponent played pawn to g6. That had to be a mistake. Like, pawn c6 was to prepare d5, but then pawn g6 in order to play bishop g7. This is unnecessary pawn move. This is the opponent breaking opening principles, and he's about to get punished as we speak on it. How I'm going to punish him is I'm going to immediately play the move pawn to e5 and attack the knight. Now, I also want you to notice how my queen is on the same line as the rook. So I don't think it's even good for him to move the knight here. Maybe he has to play d5, because if he moves the knight out the way, because my queen is on the same line as the rook, I'm able to play pawn to e6, and that's going to be a very nice discovered attack on his rook. So he decides to play the move queen to e7 instead. So I'm actually not able to take the knight. But it shouldn't matter here, because what if instead I just play the move bishop to e3? Now I'm threatening to take the knight, so now he has to move the knight. And now pawn to d5 is still possible. No, pawn to d5 is not possible. Because if pawn to d5, I take the knight and the queen is under attack, which means he has to move the knight. And then once the knight moves, we hit him with e6, discovered attack on the rook, take on f7, and we are going to be ahead by a pawn, just like 8-9 moves into the bishop's opening. So pawn to c5 was played. It's an interesting move, but it should be immediately losing if I'm not wrong. Because, okay, my queen is under attack. But what if I just take the knight and counter-attack the queen? So I take a knight, they take a queen, I take a queen. So I'm ahead by a piece. And if once they take, I take on d4. And if they take my bishop, I take a bishop. So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3 pieces. They're going to have 2 pieces. Yeah, we're definitely going for this. let's just take the knight. This is just winning. We're just ahead by a piece, a few moves into the opening. So they take my queen, I take their queen, and I'm ahead by a piece. And if the bishop take my pawn, I take their pawn. And if they take my bishop, I take their bishop with check. This is just winning for white. So they decide to take the bishop. Let's take their bishop with check. So the king or the rook has to recapture in this position. And okay, I could just cast it, but let's just take the free pawn. We're just ahead by a complete piece, by the way. From here, we just need to develop our knight, castle our king, and start trading pieces off the board, and we should just win an easy game. Knight c6 was played, okay. And in order for me to... Okay, first let's just develop our knight. I was going to play knight d5, which is a good move to threaten the fork, but let's just remain principled here. Let's try to castle the king, maybe on the queen side, maybe on the king side. It shouldn't matter, to be honest. Pawn to b6 was played, which means he's trying to fianchet to the bishop and castle on the queen side. Now I'm going to play knight to d5 to threaten a fork. So from here, he has to either move the rook or the king, and it doesn't really matter which one he chooses. He's going to lose the right to castle. So he moves the rook, which means the king is just never going to be able to get castled. I'm going to get my king out the center of the board. And my next move is likely going to be rook to f1, just putting my rook on this open file. And then I'm going to be searching for some tactics, seeing that all my pieces are going to be active. Okay, king to d8 was played. And he willingly put the king on the same line as my rook. So that's already kind of suspicious. But before we start doing anything, let's ensure that all our pieces are active. In this position, all my pieces is playing a role, which means from here, all my moves are going to be attacking moves. Pawn to f5. Okay, which means e6. If I could get a knight on e6, I could be winning a rook. So my first attacking move is going to be knight to f4, because the pawn no longer guards the e6 square. So I'm already threatening to play knight to e6 because my rook is on the same line as the king, and pin pieces does not protect. Okay, he saw it. He played king to e7. So he basically took his king off the same line as my rook. Now I'm just going to play the move bishop to b5. From here, I'm just trying to trade some pieces off the board. That's going to be the easiest way for me to win this game. Just trade as many pieces as I can. Okay, so the king moved over to f7. And okay, we have an opportunity to win a pawn here, and we're definitely going to be taking it. And that's the whole idea of once I trade here, the pawn on c6 becomes unprotected. And we already spoke about the fact that unprotected pieces causes tactics. So once we hit him with knight e5, check the king, attack the pawn on c6, this is just winning for what? Because the king has to move, we grab the pawn, hit the rook, and now we're ahead by 4 points. Well, guy didn't even... It's funny, because he blundered his rook in 2 different ways. Like, that's a fork, but that's also just a rook. And, okay, I'm assuming he's just going to take this way. And to continue the attack, we play rook to d7, just bringing more pieces in the attack. Rooks on the 7 is in heaven. And I'm trying to get this rook over on the 7th rank as well. So the king moved over to h6. Now it's time to set up some checkmating ideas. For example, we're trying to put the king in what is called a mating net. So we don't want the king to be able to escape on g5. So I'm going to play h4 just to protect the g5 square. Okay, he decides to play g5 himself, which is fine. Let's just take on g5 with check. And then once the king moves, I'm able to play rook to h1, which means this rook also joins the attack. I'm thinking about some ways to set up some mates here. Like, for example, rook h5, and if the king moves here, that should be a checkmate. Well, he decided to move the king to g4 on his own, which means that's just a checkmate. But more bishops opening against 1,300 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,300. Let's play some more bishops opening. He plays e5. Let's go bishop to c4. This is the bishops opening. And whenever we see knight c6, we're also going to be playing knight to c3 because, we can always play the Italian game whenever we want. We're going to be switching things up and playing the move pawn to d3. And after a move like bishop to b4, I'm now going to play the move knight to e2, just guarding my knight. But I'm actually trying to play the move pawn to f4. So he plays the move pawn to d6. Let me just get my king out the center of the board. He played pawn to a6. Now, I want to say it's an unnecessary pawn move, but it's not really an unnecessary pawn move. Like, I'm either planning on developing my bishop or playing the move pawn to f4. Like, they're both decent moves, to be honest. But let's just go with pawn to f4, seeing his bishop is not on this diagonal. But one thing he could try, though, is to check on c5, and then once my king moves, then he plays knight g4. Instead, he decides to castle his king, so let's just take on e5, so that way the rook gets the open file. And then my plan from here is to get my bishop to g5, which would be pinning his knight to his queen. So now that he plays knight takes e5, yes, he's attacking the bishop, but we're actually not going to move the bishop because we want to double up the pawns in front of his king. So now I'm going to play the move bishop to g5, pinning the knight to the queen. My rook on f1 is already applying pressure to the pin piece. He quickly played pawn to h6, but now I'm just going to take on f6 and attack the queen. He's not able to play queen takes. Oh, he's actually in trouble. I think he's actually losing here. He's also playing a bit fast, but look on what's happening. The bishop is unprotected. The pawn on f6 is weak. So I'm just going to play the move knight to d5, attacking the unprotected bishop, and I'm also targeting the pawn on f6 twice, which means this is now just completely lost. Okay, bishop to c5 check. That's a creative move, because now if I move my king, it gives him some time to defend his pawn on f6. Okay, I was actually about to say I'm going to hit him with d4, but pawn to d4 has a drawback. If I play pawn to d4, my bishop is left unprotected. So I am forced. Wait, can I still go d4 and if knight takes? If knight takes, I check and let's just move the king. If I move the king, there's knight g4 though. And then if f6, he checks. And then if takes, takes. I think I have to play d4. This is weird. Okay, let's just play pawn to d4. Wait. Pawn to d4, knight takes d4. Check the king. Let's play pawn to d4. This is very risky. I was not expecting to do all of this. Pawn to d4 left my bishop on c4 unprotected. And once he takes on c4, if my knight moves from d5, I'm going to be getting forked on e3. So it's actually a very, very tricky position. But because his king is weak, anything could happen. So he took on c4, and I have two options here. Do we take the bishop, or do we take on f6 with check? King to g7, take the bishop, or do we check? Let's just take back the bishop. Let's just take back the bishop first. Because I'm giving... Guy just played knight to e3. The guy just played knight to e3, forking my queen and my rook. But the 1300 guy from Sudan missed that my knight was just covering the e3 square. Now we're just ahead by an entire knight. And then he moves the king out the way. The funny thing is, I'm going to put the knight back on d5 because the f6 pawn is just impossible to defend. And maybe he wants to play rook to g8 to put his rook on this file, but knight takes f6 is just going to be a fork. This is not just GG's. Okay, pawn to f5 was played. Do we take the free pawn or do we play knight g3? Let's just take the free pawn. That's just a pawn. I'm now ahead by 4 points, and I'm trying to get this knight in the game as well. So he moves the rook over to g8. Now, knight to f6 is not good because the queen covers the f6 square. But now I'm thinking of just playing moves like knight to g3 or knight to f4. Let's go knight to g3. So that way, if he attacks my knight is able to come back to f4. So that's what he did. He attacks the knight. Now, let's just put the knight back to f4. My pawn is still guarded. If he wants to take, I'm ahead by 4 points. So I'm going to consider trading. Like, I may not trade because his king is weak. And I think I should be able to checkmate his king sooner than just going to the endgame and winning like that. So queen to g5 was played. Didn't really do too much. Maybe he wants to take on f5. But that doesn't work though. Unless he's trying to trade. Let's just take the free pawn. It's not free because if I take the pawn, he's also able to take. But let's see. I'm now ahead by 5 points. So he took. If I take, that's not mate. But if I take, the queen is able to take. The queen is going to be on the same line as my rook though. So I'm now trying to set up some tactics here. For example, knight to h5. Nice move. Because once we hit him with knight h5, his f6 square becomes weak. And I have 2 pieces attacking his bishop on f5. So if he just doesn't do anything, we take the free bishop and we win the game. Maybe he's going to play bishop to g4 thinking he's forking my queen and attacking my knight. But if he does that, I should be able to sacrifice my queen. And then if the queen takes, I check. And then if the king moves, I take the queen. So he did play bishop to g4. So what are the options here? There's so many options here. So option 1, check on f6, king moves, take the bishop. Option 2, sack the queen, queen takes, check the king moves, take the bishop. Option 3, which is what I'm going to go with, yes, the queen is under attack, but no need to move the queen if we're able to apply danger levels. We're going to take the free pawn on f7 with check. So yes, my queen is under attack, but he has to move his king. And the funny thing is, once he moves his king back to h8, queen to d4 just ends the game. Because, okay, didn't see that square for the king. Didn't see that square for the king. So now we have a slight issue. Knight is under attack, queen is under attack, rook is under attack. Let's play queen to f1. Queen to f1 saves the queen and it guards the rook at the same time. So a bit of luck there, but we're still ahead by 5 points. Okay, I was just about to explain to you guys why bishop takes was not good, but he did take, so you guys are about to see. So the reason why it's not good is because I am going to just take back the bishop, and he's actually not able to take my knight, because if he decides to take with the king, then I would have pinned the queen, but because he took with the queen no longer guards the f6 square, which means that's just a checkmate. But more bishops opening against 1,400 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,400 and we're playing more bishops opening. So after e5, we hit them with bishop c4. Wait to see which move they're going to be playing. Knight to f6, the absolute favorite move, because now we're able to play pawn to d4. And if they take on e4, they could be falling into a lot of traps. And if they take on d4, we simply develop the knight to f3 and castle our king quickly, so we're able to attack their king. Knight to c6 was played. Now, I have tried pawn to d5 because after pawn d5, knight d4, pawn c3 traps the knight. But let's just try knight to f3 this time around. But if you had tried pawn to d5, knight e7, then that's perfectly fine, by the way. Now, after pawn takes d5, what I'm not going to do is play pawn to e5. Like, it looks tempting and it is tempting. But after pawn e5, pawn d5, it transposes into some scotch. So let me just get my king out the center here. And what may happen is, if they take on e4, we go rook to e1. And a lot of aggressive stuff could come from this. So the opponent decides to play bishop to c5. Now, after bishop to c5, do we play e5? No, I think it's the same thing. If e5, there's still d5. And if I takes, there's stakes. So we're still not going to be playing e5. With that being said, let's just play pawn to c3. This is just us trying to sacrifice a pawn. I mean, we're already down by a pawn, but this is us just really sacrificing it. And then after they takes, do we play e5? Nah, there's still d5. So let's just play knight takes c3. And the idea is, we have 3 pieces developed, or king is castled, or bishop is going to be very easily developed, and it's going to be easier for us to get our king in the game. My opponent, on the other hand, is going to have a slightly harder game to play. It doesn't mean that he's losing. It means the position is equal, because he is still ahead in material. So pawn to d6 was played. He hasn't decided to castle his king. I think he wants to play bishop to g4, or maybe even bishop to e6 in this position. With that being said, let's just go bishop to g5. Let's just finish our development as quickly as we possibly can. I'm expecting to see bishop to e6 or bishop to g4 here. Immediate pawn to h6 was played. Let's just pull the bishop back, maintaining the pin on the queen. And usually in these types of positions, black players should play g5, but bishop to e6 was what we saw. Now, I have something very interesting here. What if I play knight d5? The bishop takes on d5. I hit them. Let's do that. I was also thinking of takes, queen c8, queen b3. But then there's queen c8 and then everything is guarded. So let's actually just play the move knight d5. This is me applying pressure to the pinned knight. Usually it's best to apply pressure to the pinned knight if the king is already castled though. So after they take, we could take with the pawn. Knight moves to e5, rook to e1, and then the knight is pinned. Or we could simply take with the bishop. But let's choose to take with the pawn because the king is in the center. And once the king is in the center, anytime we're able to play something like just swinging the rook over to e1, that should give us some advantage. So knight to e5 was played, and already I have some ideas. What if I play queen to a4 check? Queen a4, queen d7, bishop b5. Or take the knight first, Nah, that's weird actually. I think in all scenarios, he's gonna lose the right to castle. Rook e1, he castles, and all I do is get my pawn back. So I think it's best if I try to ensure that he doesn't castle. So queen a4, queen d7, bishop b5, pawn c6, take the knight, hit the queen. He takes my bishop, hit the queen. I take his queen. He takes my queen. I take the knight with check. He takes, and then I take, hit the rook. And then once the rook move, rook to e1 should give me a little advantage. So I'm thinking of going with that. Let's go with that. Let's go queen to a4 check. This should give me a little advantage. So queen to a4 check. And obviously, if he moves the king, he lost the right to castle. So I'm just going to work with that. So he did play queen to d7. And this was where we're going to be playing bishop to b5, pinning the queen to the king. It doesn't mean we're going to be winning the queen. This is what we looked on. So if we take the pawn first, he plays pawn takes. That should be a bit better. Like if we takes, and then take, what's the difference? I'm trying to see what the difference is. Maybe if I takes, knight takes, I should be able to check. Let's just take on e5. This was what I initially calculated. And because I get back my pawn and his king stays in the center of the board, white definitely has the advantage. Oh, I wasn't expecting him to take back on e5, actually. But since he takes on e5, now I take on d6, and this is just completely losing because my bishop and my queen is on the same diagonal as his king and his queen. So if he takes on c6, I take on c6, I pin his queen to his king, and I win the game. If he moves the queen, however, I take on b7, and that's a discovered attack on his king. And then once he moves the king, we take the rook, and we're going to have 2 queens on the board. I would not be surprised if he resigned in this position. So he moves the queen back to d8. Okay, how are we going to win? There's a lot of ways to win this game. Like, I could take the pawn, check the king, he moves the king, I take the rook. Or we move the pawn to c7 with check, which means we discover attack on the queen. So now if he moves the king, we take the queen and we win the game. If he blocks with the queen, we take the queen and we win the game. This is GG's. He blocks with the queen. And okay, if I take the queen, I get a queen for a bishop. So why not just start trading pieces off the board? This is actually a very good move. I'm actually winning a piece taking on f6. Because if he takes back on f6, that's just a free queen. And if he takes on b5 first, I take on b5 with check, and I'm going to be winning his bishop. So he took on f6. Let's take the free queen, and this is just over. So the king moves. Now I'm trying to set up some checkmates. But to win even more material, I'm actually going to promote the pawn because no one of his rooks has to take my queen. And then I'm going to just take the rook. And okay, from here, it's just GG's. Let me just get my rook in the game. I'm threatening to play queen to d8 and then pick up this rook. Okay, rook to d7 was played. Let's go rook to d5, hit the bishop. The goal is to double up on the d file. Trying to set up some mate here. Okay, a6 didn't really do much. Let's double up the rooks on the file. Okay, rook c6. Okay, now we play rook to d7 check. This definitely has to lead to mate. King to e6 was played. Queen c4 check. King goes to f. Okay, I'm going to set up the checkmate. Let's play h3. This is me setting up the checkmate. If the king goes to f5, queen to g4 is going to be a checkmate. That's what I want to do. Oh boy, but then he plays h5. The guy literally played h5. Okay, queen to e4 is also me setting up a checkmate. I want to check here, but I don't want the king to run here. So I may play g4 to prevent his king from running. Okay, pawn to f5 was played. Let's play queen to d5 check. King has to go to f6. And then I'm going to play h4. This is me setting up another checkmate. If I take on f7, that's going to be a checkmate because the king is not going to be able to run to g5. Okay, he plays pawn to f4. And finally, that's just a checkmate. But more bishops opening against 1,500 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,500 and we're going to be playing some bishops opening. Let's hit him with bishop to c4. And we're actually seeing the move knight to c6 here. And if we wanted to play the Italian game, we would have played knight c3. So let's just play the move knight to c3 instead of knight to f3. Okay, now knight to f6 was played. And now we have to be careful. If we play knight to f3, then knight takes e4, and we don't really want that. So let's play the move pawn to d3. And we're actually trying to play moves like f4 here. Again, like if we wanted to play the Italian game, we can always play knight to f3 and we're fine. So bishop to c5 was played. Now, some games could be Italian game. Some games could be Vienna. And I'm actually thinking of just playing bishop to g5 here. There's also pawn to f4, but what wrongs with bishop to g5? Let's go bishop to g5 here. Bishop to g5 pins the knight to the queen. Now, I'm assuming he's going to play h6. I think he needs to play h6 and then just chase my bishop all the way back to g3. Okay, knight to d4 was played, but that's definitely a suspicious move because you shouldn't be moving the same piece more than once in the opening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the move knight to e2 actually, not knight to f3. I'm going to play knight e2. So that way we still have the option of playing f4 if we want. And I'm also thinking of just getting my king out the center of the board. Now, another mistake for him would be if he takes on e2. Because then he would be moving the knight 1, 2, 3 times. I only move my knight once, which means he's going to be wasting 2 moves. Okay, pawn to c6. Now I see what he's trying to do. I think he wants to play d5. It doesn't quite work just yet though. So let's just first get my king out the center of the board. I want you guys to notice that I'm trying to ensure that every one of my pieces made a move. A pawn is not a piece, by the way. So all my minor pieces has already made a move and my king is castled. He moved the knight more than once. He's already making pawn moves with his king in the center of the board. His bishop is still on c8, not yet developed. So let's see if he's going to be breaking more principles. Pawn to b5, I'm slightly afraid of, slightly. Only because if I pull my bishop back to b3, he's going to get the bishop here. So he chose to simply castle his king. And okay, now I'm thinking of just taking on d4. But I also want to play pawn to f4. And because I want to play pawn, and guys, do not make this mistake. Do not be playing moves like pawn to f4 and then just allow the bishop on the same diagonal as your king. You just immediately lose the game. So anytime you want to push the f pawn, whether it's you're playing with white or you're playing with black, first I want you to tuck your king over in the corner. Because whenever there's a diagonal pointing towards your king, that is considered to be a weakness. Pawn to d6 was played. Fair enough, he's trying to develop his bishop. I guess he wants to play something like bishop to e6. But let's just continue with our plan, pawn to f4. And this is very thematic. Like, for all the persons who are always saying, okay, I know what to do in the opening. I need to develop my knight and my bishop and castle my king. But I don't know how to formulate a plan. Remember, plan equals pawn breaks. Literally even rhyme. If you say it fast enough, plan, pawn break. So whenever you don't know how to come up with a plan, ask yourself, where is the pawn breaks in the position? Where are the possible breaks that white has? Where are the possible breaks that black has? Which is why a lot of persons says, or this is what the GM say, they say pawns are the soul of the game. So you could actually literally just look on the chess position and based on the orientation of the pawns, you just immediately know what the plan is. Bishop to e6 was played, and I'm afraid to say, well, I'm not afraid, definitely not afraid, but this is my opponent's first major mistake. Is it major? It's a mistake, major or not, because the whole idea was the knight is pinned. What do we do when a piece is pinned? Very good. We PP on the PP. And a very good way to PP on the PP is to actually take on e5. Because all of a sudden, the rook is now adding pressure to the pinned knight. And it doesn't mean we're going to be winning the knight, by the way. But if we decide to take the knight on the next move, he's not going to be able to take with his queen. He's going to be forced to take with his pawn. And then just like that, his whole king side is going to be exposed. So he took back with the pawn. And do we have to take the knight? No. That's what I'm thinking. I don't necessarily have to take the knight. Nobody's forcing me to take the knight. What if I play knight g3? A move like knight g3, the idea is to apply even more pressure to the pinned knight. And I like that move, to be honest. No. Because if I play knight to g3, he's going to be right on time to pull the bishop back to e7. So we can't play knight to g3. So let's just take on f6 first. And okay, the pawn has to take on f6. And then I'm going to try to continue with my attack. Okay, let's go knight to g3 now. Now we play knight g3. The plan is to target his weak pawn on f6. And again, a weakness is a pawn or a square that cannot be guarded by another pawn. And the safety of the king can also be a weakness. So in this position, the safety of the king is weak, his f6 pawn is weak. So that's our target and that's our plan, which means the plan is to checkmate the king and target the weakness in the opponent's position. Bishop takes c4 was played. We have to take back. That's fine. And I'm assuming he's going to move this knight out the way. If he moves the knight out the way, we're definitely not going to be trading. Even though trading wins us a pawn, because the queen is the main defender of f6. And if we take the queen and he decides to take with any of the rooks, rook takes f6 wins a pawn. But we're not trying to win the pawn. We're trying to checkmate the guy. Like queen to g4, knight to h5, queen to g7, that's mate. It's easier said than done, by the way. Because what he needs to do is move his king out of the way and then play rook to g8. Like, if you find yourself in these positions where, okay, fine, there's double pawns in front of your king, just scoot your king over in the corner and then use your rook to control the open file that was created. And that's a very good way to defend your king. Yo, the guy's listening to me. He's listening to what I'm saying. It's not a bad move, bro. So he decides to play the move king to h8. And now I'm trying to play knight to h5 and attack f6. Let's go knight to h5. Let's attack the pawn on f6. And I'm assuming he's going to play bishop back to e7, which would be a nice move. You know, guy's trying to defend. Not necessarily trying to defend. He's definitely defending, because that's the right way to defend here. Anytime I play the move queen to g4, trying to checkmate him on g7, he's just going to play rook to g8, and then my queen is going to be under attack. Okay. Bishop to e7 was played, guys defending. So let's say we go queen g4, rook g8, queen h4. He's going to play f5. I don't like that. I need to find a way to get even more pieces in the attack. I need to find a way to have even more pieces targeting f6. Or at least neutralize this annoying knight on d4. Like, what if I play a move like knight to e2? If he takes, I takes, and we successfully neutralize the knight. So let's do that. Let's go the move knight to e2. And this is the principle of neutralization, by the way. Basically, it means if a piece is on your half of the board, you need to figure out how to get that piece out of your half of the board. It doesn't mean that if a piece is on your half of the board, you have to immediately get that piece out of your half right now. It just means your plan should be to get that piece out of your half. So rook to g8 was played. If I takes, he's going to play queen takes. We're not trying to trade any queens here. With that being said, let's just play the move knight to g3. I'm still neutralizing the knight, by the way, because my knight was on c3, so I wasn't able to play pawn to c3. Now my plan is to play pawn to c3, force his knight away, move my queen to f3 so we don't trade. Remember, whenever you're attacking, do not trade. You should only trade if you're defending or you're ahead in material. And if you're defending and you're behind in material, then you should also not trade. So that's how trading works. So based on the weaknesses in the opponent's position, f5 is a weak square because it can never be guarded by a pawn. f6 is a weak pawn because it can never be guarded by a pawn. Rook to g6 was played. Guys defending with everything he has. Now we play the move pawn to c3, and we successfully neutralize the only piece, the most active piece that the opponent has, that is on our half of the board, was neutralized. Note well, he kind of has to play knight to e6, and the knight is also heading to g5. So after knight e6, I was thinking of playing queen to f3, but then knight to g5 would definitely be an annoying move. I'm trying to also play knight to f5 as well. But first, I'm going to play the move queen to e2, not trading because we're attacking. I have plans of playing rook to d1, principle of the least active piece. Shout out to Mr. Smirnov. Okay, knight to f4 was played. Come on, bro. Learn to count, man. The guy only has one piece covering the f4 square. Yes, my queen is under attack, but I have two pieces covering the f4 square. Which means once I take, takes, and I'm ahead by a pawn. Bishop to d6, though, is actually tricky because I'm forced to move my rook, and then he takes, and then he doubles up my pawn, though. That's the thing. Okay, let's just take on f4. We definitely have to take on f4. Now, once he takes on f4, I'm thinking of playing an in-between move, rook to d1. Because if I take the pawn, which is fine, it's not losing or anything. But if I take the pawn, bishop to d6 hits the rook. Rook has to move. He takes, doubles up my pawn, slightly uncomfortable. So let's play what is called an in-between move first. First, we're going to play the move rook to d1. So this is also called danger levels. It basically means you have a piece, in this case, 3 points is under attack. No need to defend your 3 points if you're able to counter attack 9 points. So he has to either move the queen out the way or block with the bishop. Blocking with the bishop would immediately blunder the bishop. So he decides to move the queen out the way. And then moving the queen out the way also defends the pawn on f4. Now, I'm thinking of playing two moves. Do I play knight to f5 just to put my knight on a good square? Or do I play knight to h5 so that way I'm able to take on f4? Let's just play knight to f5. I'm not trying to be too materialistic, to be honest. I mean, rook to g8 though. That's a nice move. That's a nice move though. Because my pawn on g2, all of a sudden, I'm the one who's defending. And he did find rook to g8. So how am I going to do this? I'm thinking of playing knight to h4. Hit the rook. I'm thinking of playing pawn to g3 followed by knight takes. I'm thinking of playing rook to g1. Rook to g1 is just such an ugly move though. I don't feel comfortable playing rook to g1. I think I have to do it, but I don't feel comfortable doing it. Alright, let's just play rook to f2 instead. I'm going to be defending actively. Now, bishop to c5 would be a good try because which is what he played. He's basically removing the piece that is guarding g2. Luckily, I'm able to play this move, knight to d4. All of a sudden, this guy's playing like he's Magnus. But his king is not the weakness anymore. His pawn structure is now the weakness. So my plan from here is just to take off all his pawns. I'm not trying to checkmate his king anymore. I'm probably going to play queen to h5 and attack his bishop because those moves are kind of hard to see. And maybe he's not going to notice that I'm attacking his bishop. Okay, queen to b6. Guy's playing like he's Magnus. So f4 is no longer guarded, but if I take on f4, there's some cases where he takes on g2. Pawn to b4, he takes my knight. I take with the rook, and that's fine. All right, let's just continue with the game plan. Let's just play queen to f3 and target the weaknesses in the opponent's position. So queen to f3 hits the pawn. There's not a lot of good ways to guard the pawn unless he wants to pull the bishop and the queen back. He decides to take on d4, which I'm fine with him taking on d4 because now I'm able to undouble my pawns and my structure is now good. His structure is not good. Rook to h6 didn't do anything. He also does not have enough time on the clock to do anything. But now we're just going to take on f4. That's a pawn hitting the unprotected rook. So he has to put the rook back on g6. Okay. The guy played okay. He played very well, but unfortunately, under time pressure, his rook is just left unprotected, and we just took the rook and we won the game, and the opponent decides to resign. But more bishops opening against 1,600 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,600. We're playing some more bishops opening. So after e5, the bishops opening starts with immediate bishop to c4, and we're going to be seeing a lot of knight to f6. And I think the secret weapon is to play pawn to d4. Like whenever they play knight to f6, go pawn to d4. And if they take with the knight, you take their pawn. If they take on d4 though, we actually don't need to take with the queen. Like we're not trying to develop our queen too early because there's knight c6. So I'm just going to play the move knight to f3 and attack the pawn on d4. And if they take on e4, capturing another pawn, I'm just going to get my king out the center of the board. Or play the move queen takes d4. Yeah, I think the move is queen takes d4. But bishop to b4 check is definitely an interesting move. Here's how we're going to do this. We're currently a pawn behind, but we're still going to play the move pawn to c3 so that way we're able to keep the tempo in the position. Because now if he takes, we're actually going to take with the pawn. Not the knight, like, okay, let's take with the knight so that way we're able to develop. Nah, we're going to be taking with the pawn because it would be good if we're able to take with the knight and then it's our turn to move again. But in order for us to keep the tempo, this is called the initiative, by the way. In order for us to keep the initiative, our moves has to be attacking moves. So now he has to move the bishop out the way. And then once he moves the bishop out the way, then we could continue with our attacking moves. So the bishop went to c5. And this is where I'm just going to use the time to get my king out the center of the board. Now, he needs to get his king out the center of the board, and he got his king out the center of the board pretty quickly. And now I'm just going to play the move bishop to g5, pinning his knight to his queen. So if he wants to win my pawn on e4, he needs to play h6 followed by g5, and that will be exposing his king. Now, again, I am one pawn behind, but I have a little lead in development. Like, he needs to move this pawn, he needs to move his bishop, he needs to move his knight, and all I need to do to finish my development is move my knight on d2. So once my development is complete, I'm going to be in the middle game. He's still going to be in the opening. So while I start my attack, he's still going to be trying to get out of the opening stage of the game. So he did play pawn to h6. Bishops are better than knight. We're not going to be taking that knight. We're going to pull the bishop back to h4, maintaining the pin on his queen. And then he pulls the bishop back to e7, which means the bishop was actually one of the only piece that he had that was developed. So now that we have him moving the bishop more than once in the opening, that's nice for us. Here's what we're going to hit him with now. Okay, let's think. Pawn to e5 hits the knight. Knight back to h7. And because I'm down by a pawn, I don't really want to trade. So I may play bishop g3 and then he plays pawn d6. Maybe I don't want to do that. What if I play knight d2, he takes on e4, I takes, queen takes, I takes, queen takes. Okay, that's also a bit tricky. All right, here's what we're going to do. Let's just play the move knight to d2. Let's just finish our development because he's moving his knight more than once in the openings. He's moving the bishop more than once in the opening. My development is complete. So he just played the move pawn to d6, which means I think he's trying to pin my knight to my queen. So, or maybe he wants to play bishop to e6. Like, he's trying to move the bishop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play rook to b1. I'm still finishing my development. And I understand. I'm always telling you guys, development is complete. Development is complete if all your minor pieces are developed. But your development is really complete if all your minor pieces and your major pieces are developed. So now he plays the move knight c6. Let's play the move rook to e1. Now, because I'm trying to ensure that my minor pieces are active and my major pieces are active. I just want him to have a hard game to play, basically. So, yes, he's ahead by a pawn. But for example, his bishop on e7 is just not as active as mine. And now he played the move rook to b8 because, he's aware of the drawback principle. He wants to move the light squared bishop, but he knows if he moves the light squared bishop, he's going to be blundering the pawn on b7. So that's why he played rook to b8. From here, I'm thinking queen to c2 or knight back to f1. Let's play knight f1. Knight f1, I'm trying to maneuver my knight to g3 or e3. And I'm also assuming he's going to play bishop to g4. If he plays bishop g4, I may play h3. It's very tricky. I'm basically trying to outmaneuver him here. So bishop to e6 was played. If I takes, pawn takes, queen to b3, hits the unprotected pawn, which means he has to guard the pawn. And that could be my opportunity to put my rook on the same line as his queen. Now, we don't necessarily want to be trading too many pieces because we're still down by a pawn. Don't forget that. But it's also very important that we're the one who is attacking. So let's play the move queen to b3. Let's hit the unprotected pawn. And if the queen goes to d7, I'm thinking rook to d1 just to put my rook on the same line as his queen. And if we're able to put the rook on the same line as his queen, then that's how some tactics could happen on the board. I'm not going to lie though, like this guy's playing very well. But this is where the blunders usually happens. But let's see how well he's going to continue to play. Oh my lord, I think he's listening to me because he didn't even play queen to d7. He played queen to c8. So I'm also not able to put my rook on the same line as his queen. So now I'm just thinking about playing pawn to e5. I mean, we have to start the attack. Pawn e5 hits the knight. If he takes, I takes. And if he takes, I takes. And then his e6 pawn becomes the weakness. And if you guys are not aware about what is a weakness in chess, a weakness is basically a pawn or a square that cannot be guarded by another pawn. So his pawn on e6 is the main weakness in the position. And because his pawn on e6 is the main weakness, I'm trying to target my pieces towards his e6 pawn. And this is called a pawn break, by the way. Usually when I teach my students about pawn breaks, it just changes how they see chess. Because, sometimes you already develop all your pieces and then you're like, okay, but what's the plan from here? The plan is to even activate your pieces even more. And that's where pawn breaks comes in. Knight to g4 was played. Like, who is this guy? He's playing very well. Shout out to Lockin from Taiwan. You're playing some chess, bro. Well, I'm not going to take that back. I'm not going to take that back. He's playing some chess. We have a little tactic here that is going to win back our pawn, but he is playing some chess. So what I'm going to do is, okay, his bishop is pointing towards my bishop, so we're definitely going to be taking on e7. And then once the knight takes on e7, notice how I have two pieces pointing towards e6. So that's why I'm going to take on d6. And then once his pawn take on d6, I'm going to be able to take on e6 with either my rook or my queen. And I basically won back the pawn. It doesn't mean I'm winning. I won back the pawn. But to be honest with you guys, whenever you play, let's say you play an opening, right? And you had to sacrifice a pawn. If you had to sacrifice a pawn, then it means the position is equal because you have more activity, but the opponent has the extra pawn. With that being said, if you're able to regain back your pawn and keep the activity, it means you're better. But it also means if the opponent is able to hold on to the pawn and increase the activity of their position, they're better. So he took with the pawn, and we're definitely not going to be trading queens here because we're the one who is attacking. And especially since my queen is on the same line as his king and the knight is unprotected. This is how tactics happens in chess, by the way, guys. Like, I always tell this to my students. Your ability to identify a weakness in a chess position will determine how good you are at chess. So for example, how good are you able to notice that the queen is on the same line as the king, the knight is unprotected, this knight is unprotected? If you're able to see those things, that's where tactics is going to be flowing in the position. I think I'm winning here, to be honest, like, because if he moves the knight, we hit him with a discovery. And if he plays pawn to d5, it means there's nothing guarding the knight. The knight is unprotected, so that's just a free knight. The guy played well, though, I'm not gonna lie. Know that the knight, we're ahead by a knight. The goal from here is to start trading pieces off the board. I have 3 pieces attacking b7. He only has 2 pieces guarding it. And my queen is attacking his unprotected pawn on d5. So he decides to play the move queen to d6. Again, that's a free pawn. And I want to take the pawn, but I'm wondering if I should play the move knight d4 and hit the queen. Definitely something that a greedy person would do. Maybe I should play h3. Like, this is just us using the principle of neutralization. Like, b7 is hanging. We're going to be taking the b7 pawn. But if a piece is on our half of the board, it should be priority to neutralize that piece. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to play the move pawn to h3. Let's neutralize the knight. And another thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is whenever you have an unprotected piece, I want you to babysit that piece. I want you to just pay that piece a bit more attention because it's unprotected. And then until you're able to coordinate that piece with the rest of your pieces, that's when you could take a sigh of release. But every move I make, everything that the opponent does, I'm going to be watching out for my rook on e7 because it's unprotected. So the knight went back to f6. And, okay, again, that's a free pawn. If I takes, rook takes, he's going to play queen takes c3, which is winning for me. I'm also thinking of knight e3. This is just me finding the piece that I have that is not doing anything and just give it something to do. I like the idea of knight to d4 because it attacks the queen. Actually, let's play the move knight d4. I like knight d4. It's an attacking move, and we should be playing attacking moves. There's also some traps that I'm setting here. I think he's gonna play the move queen to d6. That's why I played knight d4. If he plays queen to d6, he's gonna be falling for a little tactic. So let's see. And if he does not play queen to d6, leave a comment on what white is gonna play if black plays queen d6. So he played queen to d6. Ensure that you found the move. But how do we find tactics in a chess position? We start by looking on the forcing moves. What are forcing moves? Forcing moves are those moves where you put a piece on the opponent's half of the board, my fellow viewers, and those forcing moves are usually a check, a capture, or a threat. With that being said, we're going to hit him with the move rook takes g7, check. And the king is not able to take the rook. He has to move the king to h8. Because after we play rook takes g7, if he dares to touch our rook on g7, we're going to hit him with knight f5, and that's going to be a beautiful fork. So he didn't take, he saw it. Very strong guy. I knew he would have found that though, but we got the pawn. So I guess it's time to start trading pieces off the board. Let's now take on b7. We're now ahead by 5 whole entire points. So we're now going to start trading from here. So he took with the rook. Let's just take with the queen. And then he played rook to g8, which means we have to be careful. The rook is on the same line as our king. And whenever a rook is on the same line as our king, just be a bit careful. So what I'm basically doing is I'm checking the possible forward moves where he could move a piece. But I'm not really seeing what it does. And just to be even more careful, I'm going to play the move knight to g3. So that way the rook is now just not as active as it wants to be. And I'm assuming he wants to play rook to g7 and attack my queen. But if he plays rook to g7, I'm going to play the move queen to b8, trading the queens off the board. No, 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 we're not going to play queen to b8. If he plays rook to g7, we're going to hit him with the same tactic that we hit him with before. So he decides to play queen to f4. A piece is on our half of the board, by the way. Whenever a piece is on your half of the board, you have to be a bit more aware of what's happening. So again, let's just check to see what's happening. Maybe f2 is hanging. He may want to play knight to d5, but we're actually just not afraid of any of that. So let's just take the free pawn on a7. And now we're ahead by 6 points. I mean, rooks on the 7 is in heaven. Rook to b8, some ideas of trading the rooks off the board. And I'm also thinking of knight f5, but white is fine here. So he did play the move knight to e4, and I am thinking of rook to b7 because rooks on the 7 indeed is in heaven. If I take the knight, he's going to play queen takes, threatening a checkmate and attacking my rook. Yo, he's also threatening to take on f2 though. And I have a minute on the clock. What's happening? Takes, queen takes. Okay, let's just play knight back. Oh no, knight e6 was actually better because it attacks the queen and my queen was guarding f2. Now he's able to take stakes and then he's winning a pawn. Ay, ay, ay. Okay, I have to win this game in 42 seconds. But he also has a minute on the clock. Maybe he's going to be the one who loses on time. So he took, let's take, hit the queen. And if he plays rook takes, he loses the queen to b8. And if he plays queen takes, okay, queen takes. Oh no, backside. I almost got checkmated. Okay, let's just give a check first. Let's give a check. If he blocks with the rook, that check doesn't work. He moves the king. Let's give another check. If he puts the king here, then we're not getting checkmated because he's threatening mate. If he blocks with the rook, we trade the pieces off the board. He blocks with the rook. Now we just need to trade the pieces off the board. This is called simplification. And now we're just going to roll the pass pawn and win the game. Very, very simple chess. We're not just going to put our queen back on the board. And okay, he's not resigning, but we have a few seconds on the clock. So we still have to ensure that we convert it. Let's give a check. Give a check there. Now we cut off the king, and this should be mate. Knight here, and then this should be a checkmate. Okay, he moves the king. Okay, let's just play king up. Once he moves the king, that's just a checkmate. More bishops opening against 1,700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,700, and we're playing some more bishops opening. And as we've been talking about, whenever they play this knight f6 move, attacking the pawn, we're just going to play the move pawn to d4, not guarding the pawn, because we want them to take the pawn. And our 1,700 opponent took the pawn. Now we're going to take on e5. Now, black is not losing. Black just has to be careful in this particular scenario. For example, if he plays the regular knight to c6 or the regular bishop to c5, he will be in trouble. Also, if he plays pawn to d5, he will also be in trouble. So let's see what he comes with. Bishop to c5 was played, my fellow viewers, and the 1,700 opponent is already losing. And this is losing because, okay, he's attacking f2 twice. He's threatening to take on f2, but we don't care. We're not going to hit him with the move queen to d5 because not only are we threatening a checkmate on f7, we're also attacking the knight on e4. The thing is, yes, he could move away the knight and guard the mate, but the knight is covering the bishop on c5. This is what happens in the bishop's opening. It's probably going to be a short video because if they don't know all of these traps, they're going to be in trouble. So bishop takes f2 was played. Just remain calm. This is what we discussed in the intro. If they take with the bishop or they take with the knight, we're going to calmly move our king out the way. So let's just calmly move the king to f1. Moving the king to e2 is also fine. Just ensure that you keep on attacking the bishop on f2, so that way, once he castles the king or move the knight, we're able to take the free bishop. This is just completely winning. So he decided to simply get his king out the center of the board, and as we said, now we simply take the free knight. Not only are we ahead by a piece, but we're also just still winning. So maybe you're like, okay, but the king is not safe. There's no way for him to attack our king. He's the one who's behind in development. And I'm assuming he's going to be taking on g1. But then that's giving up a bishop for a knight. Pawn to d5 Is that a good try? I mean, the guy's also not counting properly. I'm attacking the square twice. He's only guarding with the queen. So if I take on d5, that's a pawn. I think he wants to play c6, and then when I move my bishop, he checks. But I'm also going to be able to take here. I think I'm just going to take en passant, though. And then if the rook goes to e1, to attack my queen, I just move my... How do we do this? Or do we just play queen takes d5? I'm already ahead by a piece. Why not just trade the queens off the board? Let's just play queen takes d5. I'm not going to try to be fancy. If you're ahead by a piece, just trade the queens off the board. Because the moment he trades queens, it's game over. Okay, so he decides to pull the bishop back. And, okay, we still want to trade queens, by the way. But why not just develop the knight first? You know, gain the tempo on the bishop. Because if I decide to take his queen, his rook is going to take, and then the rook is going to get an open file. Still winning, by the way. But let's just play the move knight to f3, developing the knight, gaining the tempo on the queen. I want to play moves like knight c3, bishop to g5. Eventually, I'm going to be trading the queens, though. So the bishop went back to e7. And again, I think it's time to trade the queens now. Because he already wasted a bishop move. So let's use the time now to trade the queens off the board. Then we simply finish with our development. I'm ahead by 3 points. There is no losing this game. Knight c6 was played. We have to ensure that we're aware of the possible forward moves that the opponent has on our half of the board, but it doesn't really do anything. Let's just finish with our development. All our pieces are developed. Now we just need to move the king so that way the rooks are connected, swing the rooks in the game, and just convert this into a win. Let's look on the opponent's last move, bishop to f5, which means my unprotected pawn on c2 is under attack. But that's fine. Let's just simply pull the bishop back to b3, guarding the pawn. Knight to b4 would be an annoying move because then I may have to play rook to c1. Pawn a5 was played instead. Doesn't do anything though, because if pawn a4, I'm just going to take. Doesn't change anything. So let's play the move king to f2. And then the plan from here is to play rook to d1, rook to e1. If you're winning, the goal is to trade pieces off the board. Always keep that in mind. Okay, bishop went back to f8, not sure why. Our rooks are now the only pieces that aren't really participating in the game. So let's just swing the rooks over in the game. Rook to d1. Again, we want him to trade. He's not trading. So he's doing the right thing, not trading. And he's also targeting my pawn on e5. So if you know how to count, he's attacking the pawn twice. I'm only guarding the pawn once. So I need to either add a defense to the pawn or remove one of his attacks from the pawn. How am I going to do this though? I'm thinking knight d5 actually. Knight d5 attacks his pawn on c7. So if he takes on e5, then he's just going to get forked. But then he has knight to g4, and then that could be possibly winning. Let's not complicate the game. Let's just play the move bishop to e4 here. Again, if you're winning, trade pieces off the board. Bishops are better than knights, but not if you're ahead by 3 points. Because I am ahead by 3 points in this position, I'm just going to be giving up that bishop for the knight. I don't care. Rook to e6 was played, and as stated before, bishops are better than knights, but not if you're ahead by 3 points. And based on what I'm seeing, rook takes is also bad. And there's an unprotected bishop on f5. The rook on c6 is misplaced. They're both on light squares. I'm now able to hit him with the move knight to d4. And that's a fork, which means he's also going to be losing even more material. Okay, bishop to g4 was not bad. That's not a bad move at all. It's a counter attack. The guy was like, I'm attacking his rook. He's going to counter attack my rook. Now, in a normal circumstance, I think that would be very good for him. But again, I'm ahead by a piece. I want to trade. Like, I could simply move the rook, and then he moves his rook. Okay, I'm not going to lie. I could take his rook. He takes my rook. I take my bishop. Then he takes my knight. That's completely winning, by the way. But I'm actually going to be moving the rook because his rook on c6 is actually misplaced. Like, if you look on the rook, it doesn't really have a lot of good squares to move to. Like, it's in front of the pawn. Maybe he plays rook to c5 and attack this pawn, but I'm going to use the time to play h3 and gain a tempo on his bishop. Plus, he's going to be putting his rook on the same diagonal as my bishop. But let's see what moves he played, though. Rook to c4 was played, and I'm not able to play pawn to b3 due to the drawback principle. I'm going to be leaving my knight unprotected. There are 2 pieces on my half of the board, though. The principle of neutralization states, whenever a piece is on your half of the board, you must neutralize it. So let's play the move pawn to h3, neutralizing the bishop. The plan is to neutralize the rook. It's just not possible as yet. Probably should have traded though, to be honest. Like I didn't see bishop g4. But the bishop went back to h4, pawn to g4, bishop is gonna go back to g6. I'm also thinking knight to d5 so that way I'm able to play knight to f4. But now we're gonna be following the principle of the least active piece. This is something that I learned from Igor Smirnov. It basically means whenever you're playing and you do not have a forcing move, you do not have a good check, you do not have a good capture, you're not able to create a threat, find the least active piece and put it on a better score. Bishop to b4 was a very nice move. All of a sudden, the guy's just attacking me. Good thing I'm ahead by a piece. So he's now threatening to take my knight. I'm trying to play rook to d2, but there's this annoying bishop to g4 move. Knight to b4, I like. Pawn to c6 attacks. Yeah, let's go knight to b4. Knight to b4 basically adds additional defense to my knight because he's attacking it twice and I'm now guarding it twice. With that being said, I'm assuming he's going to play pawn to c6, trying to remove the guard of the c3 square. And what I'm going to do is play the move knight to d6. Yes, the knight is under attack. Yes, he's attacking c3 twice, but I'm attacking his rook. I think he needs, if he sacrifices the rook, he wins a pawn. But if he wins a pawn, I'm going to be ahead by 2 points. So it's just winning in all scenarios for me. Oh boy, he moves the rook to c5. He puts the rook right on the line where my bishop is. That's just a rook, bro. Now the bishop has to take. Yes, it's a check, but I'm just going to move. Now we're ahead by 5 points. Like, we're now ahead by an entire rook. Bishop went back to g6. That's a free pawn. There's nothing guarding it. His last move wasn't really doing much. So let's just take the free pawn, hit the bishop. I'm also trying to double up my rooks on the d file so that way I'm able to trade. Rook to b8 was played. The guy also blundered his bishop. Yeah, he's blundering everything. Now it's just GG's. We're ahead by 9 points. And he resigns. But more bishops opening against 1,800 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,800 and we're going to be playing some bishops opening. And it starts with the move bishop to c4. Pawn c6 was played. I think he's trying to play the move pawn to d5. So I'm going to play the move knight c3 to prevent pawn to d5. And then he plays bishop to c5. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the move pawn to d3. So that way I'm able to play pawn to f4 followed by knight e2 or knight to f3. You know, it all depends. Okay, now he plays pawn to d6. The question is, do we play knight e2 and castle or do we play f4? If I play f4, it's going to be harder for me to castle because his bishop is on this diagonal. So let's just play knight to e2 so that way I'm able to get my king out the center and then play pawn to f4. This is the whole idea that we've been doing this game. So knight to f6 was played. Let me just use the time to get my king out the center of the board. I need to be careful. Knight g4 followed by queen g4 could be winning in some lines. But if he plays knight to g4, I should be able to play h3. But then he plays h5 and then he's going for some fishing pole traps. But let's see if he's going to be going for that. So he did play knight g4. This is going to be a very interesting game because queen to h4 is coming. And if I play h3, what if he takes on f2 and then play queen to h4? That should not work. Okay, if I play h3 and then he plays queen h4, I should be able to take. So let's start by playing the move h3. So I'm not going to be losing my pawn on h2. I'm expecting pawn to h5 in this position. And I think he's going for the fishing pole trap. Yo, pawn to h5 was played. That's very aggressive. Now, if I take the knight, he takes, and queen to h5 is just going to be GG's, to be honest. So what I'm going to do here is, I think he's trying to start an attack, a very early attack on the king side. So I think I need to counterattack as quickly as possible in the center of the board. So, because I mean, I'm not able to develop this bishop. I'm thinking of knight a4 to take, but it's going to be harder for me to counterattack. So let's immediately counterattack in the center. And this is something very important. Whenever the opponent is attacking on the flanks, you need to counterattack in the center. And if you're not able to counterattack in the center, try to counterattack on the opposite flank. So he took. Now I'm gonna take, so that way his bishop is not as active. Now, if this guy plays queen to f6, then I'm just gonna report him. Yo, queen to f6, which means if I put my knight on any weird square, he's gonna be taking my pawn on f2, which means I have to move the knight, but I think the underscore for the knight is f3. Now, what if I'm creative and I play bishop e3? Bishop e3. Bishop e3 is a creative move, to be honest, because if knight takes, pawn takes, then I'm attacking f7. Knight back to f3, a bit passive in my opinion. Let's play bishop to e3. Yeah, let's go with bishop to e3. So f2 is under a lot of pressure. The good thing is, well, the bad thing is if he takes and I takes, I lose the bishop here. My pawns are doubled. But the good thing is, if he does that, I'm going to be winning his pawn on f7. Maybe he's able to play d5 first, and then if I takes, he takes, but that's also not good. Okay, he took on e3. Let's take back on e3. This should not be good, by the way, because my rook is attacking his queen, my bishop is targeting his pawn on f7, which means now his queen has to move. And anywhere in the world he puts the queen, his f7 pawn is hanging. So he decides to play the move queen to g5, which means not only is he attacking e3, he's also threatening to play bishop takes h3. But first I'm going to take on f7 with check. I'm ahead by a pawn, by the way, so I'm chill here. I just need to not get checkmated. I just need to not lose any of these pawns, because the queen is on the same line as my king. The bishop is on the same line as my king. He's threatening to take here, but I think regardless of the move that he plays next, I should play queen to f3. No. Because there's actually rook to f8 coming. If queen to f3, there's rook f8. Okay, this is actually very, very risky. The good thing is he's not able to immediately take though. And if I take on h5 after rook f8, then he takes on e3 and I'm losing. Okay, this is now it's getting very risky. Very, very risky. Okay, let's start by playing the move queen to f3. We have to defend against this. We have to protect our bishop. If he plays rook to f8, then he has two attackers. I currently have two defenders, so for the moment, I'm safe. Just for the moment. How do I get out of this though? I want to take on h5, but then queen takes e3 is a check. Does that mean I need to play rook to e1 first? I think that's what it means. But if rook to e1, there's takes, bishop e6. That's GG's though. And if knight f5, there's bishop takes, queen takes, and that's also GG's. Am I losing? Takes, check, king over takes, and then check. Okay, I think I have to sacrifice a piece here, which is crazy, and my time is running out. Because if I play rook over, he takes my knight, I take his bishop, he plays bishop e6, pp on the pp. Okay, this is weird. I have to go in this weird line that I don't want to go in. But in my defense, I don't think I have a defense. But in my defense, his king is weak, and all my pieces are going to be active. He's going to have one more piece than me, but his king is not going to be safe. So I'm going to try in all my power to attack that king. Queen takes e3, king h1, bishop takes d4 is very strong. Very, very strong. So queen e3, have to play king h1, and then my knight is just hanging here. So if he plays queen takes, I may just check and take this pawn. So I'm assuming he's going to play bishop takes. If he plays bishop takes, I'm thinking rook to e1, hit the queen. So bishop takes was played. Bishop takes. Bishop takes. Okay, let's hit the queen. First, let's hit the queen. The rook is on the same line as the king. I'm thinking about knight d5 actually. I think he's going to play queen h6 because he needs to trade. And I cannot trade. If I trade, I'm losing. So queen h6. I'm thinking of playing knight d5. Takes, bishop block. Takes, check. Knight d5, check. Maybe he moves the king somewhere. All right, this is going to be very risky, but we're going for it. Let's go knight to d5, check. I have all my pieces in the attack. I think if he takes, he's losing. But king to... Okay, he took. Is he losing? That's a check. If he blocks with the bishop, I sack. Okay, it's actually not losing. But I still have to do it. I just have to do it. I have to attack his king. Once he blocks with the bishop, I'm going to sack, takes, check. The king is going to move to d6. And I'm only going to have 3 pieces on the board. Like, if I don't deliver a checkmate right now, okay, he didn't block with the bishop, so I'm not going to sack. But it means my bishop is a bit safe. I cannot trade the queens. Okay, let's just play, let's go queen to e2. I'm threatening a checkmate on e7. Now he needs to play bishop to e5. Now I'm down by 4 points. This is just risky. Okay, bishop back to f6 was played. I'm not able to sack. This is unprotected. This is under attack. So let's just go bishop to e6. I don't want to trade, by the way, but I think I had to make that trade. And then I'm going to play pawn takes with some ideas of pushing here. Maybe he doesn't need to trade either. Now, this is where I have to start playing a bit fast. Now, what am I down by? I think I'm down by two pieces. Oh, I'm down by 2 pieces. So knight d7 was played. He's not trying to trade. If I take, he takes. So let's go queen to b5. Now, the plan is to take on d7 and then take on b7, which is not enough, but I have to attack the guy. So he decides to play knight to e5. Very nice move, because if I takes, he plays king takes and he's safe. Let's play queen to, okay, let's actually, if I check, he blocks. No need to do that. Let's play queen to b4 and target his unprotected pawn. Such a crazy position. I think I have to just sacrifice. Bishop back to e7 guards it. I cannot trade. I don't want to trade. I think I have to trade. Oh boy, bishop e7. So takes, check. King up. Okay, let's try that. Let's take on f8. Bishop takes, we take on e5. So I'm sacrificing the rook, and if he takes, I take the bishop, the king moves to e7, and then I check on c5. I think I'm able to draw this game if that happens, but I'm trying to win. Like, I'm not trying to draw. But if I have to draw, then I just have to draw. Guy played very well, to be honest. Okay, what I'm noticing is his time is ticking. Takes, king up. Maybe check. Maybe pawn push with check. Yo, he didn't take it. The guy didn't. I was bluffing, bro. I wasn't sure if that works. But hey, he did not take it. That's crazy, actually. Let's just pull the let's just pull the rook back. I'm not chilling. I'm fine. I'm down by a point, but I'm fine. This has to be good for white. Like, I need to check to see if that sack was so good, though, because his king would have been running about the place, but he literally did not take it. So now he decides to take. I want to take with the rook and attack his queen, but he will be able to check my king. So let's just take with the pawn. And now I'm threatening to take on b7. I want to check on a5. Still not winning. I don't think white is winning, but I don't think I'm lost. I don't think my position is completely lost. I'm only down by a point. His king is not safe. His rooks are not doing anything. I should be able to continue my attack. Andy has a minute 30 on the clock. So pawn b6 was played. Now we're going to quickly hit him with queen to e4, attacking the unprotected rook. And then the plan is to play queen to b7 followed by queen to d7. So rook to c8, queen to b7, rook to c7, queen to b8 check, rook to c8, queen takes a7. That's what we're going to play. So queen to b7 threatens a checkmate on d7. So he has to play rook to c7 to prevent... he decides to attack my unprotected... Oh, wait. Okay. Oh, it is mate. That's just a checkmate. But more bishops opening against 1900 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1900. Let's play some bishops opening. After e5, bishop c4. That's the signature move. And after knight c6, we're just going to be playing knight c3. And it's actually very similar to the Vienna game, to be honest. Like, if they go bishop to c5, we are going to be playing queen to g4 and attack them on g7. Guy played f6. I thought persons at 1900 stop playing moves like f6. Guys, do not play f6. Do not be like this guy. White is already winning. I mean, or you'll say I'm already winning a pawn, but the guy has already exposed a diagonal pointing towards his king. So with that being said, I'm actually going to be giving up my bishops for a knight. You know, don't be giving up your bishops for a knight. But if someone played f6, now, once he takes on g8, I'm now able to hit him with queen to h5, which checks the king, and I'm now threatening to take on h7. This is now GG's. Okay, pawn g6 was played. Let's just take on g7. Let's now just hit the rook, and from here it's just chess, to be honest. Like, I mean, I think white is winning, but it's not like it's just completely game over. Okay, I think the safe move is to play queen h4, but let's just play queen to h8 here. Let's pin the opponent's bishop, and then I'm gonna try to, knight to d4. Knight d4 is a very good move. Pawn d3 takes, king over takes, and then bishop h6 doesn't work because he has rook f7, which means I'm ahead by a pawn, but I'm actually forced to play king to d1. That's an ugly move because I just lost the right to castle. Nobody likes to not castle. So pawn c6 was played. He's trying to play pawn to d5. Let's play the move pawn to d3. Idea is to play bishop to h6. If bishop h6, there's rook to f7, so it's not like I'm winning or anything. But I'm just trying to develop as quickly as possible here. I'm trying to get as many pieces as in the game as quickly as possible. And my king is not going to be safe while I'm doing this. But I'm ahead by a pawn, so that has to count for something. So queen to e7 was played. Rook to h7. Rook to h7 is definitely the threat. So let's just play bishop to h6. And if he plays rook to h7, I'm going to trade the queens off the board, bring him in the endgame, and win the game up a pawn. He played rook to f7. That's a better move to play because obviously he should not want to go into an endgame. Now I'm thinking of just playing queen to g8 and attack the unprotected pawn on g6. I need to be careful not to get my queen trapped, by the way. It's very important that I don't get my queen trapped. And I think his plan is to move the pawn, develop the bishop, and castle the king. So let's start by playing queen to g8 here. The bishop is pinned, so my bishop on h6 is not hanging. Pawn to g5, I'm expecting. He did play pawn to g5. And once I take, rook takes check. That's probably something I'm going to do. For now, though, let's try to develop as many pieces as possible. Because I'm not going to lie. I think white is better here, but it's kind of weird. You know, like why would someone play pawn to c5 in this position? Like, this is called the drawback principle, by the way, guys. Pawn on c6 guards d5. Pawn moves to c5. Pawn no longer guards d5. Knight controls d5. Put the knight on d5. Simple chess. Okay, knight d5 hits the queen. Queen to d6 or d8 because he doesn't want to get forked, right? So knight d5, queen d6. Grab, rook grab, and then check. It's funny, I don't even have to play knight d5 just yet, though. I want to play h4. I'm trying to get my rookie in the game. But let's just play knight d5. It's the natural move. It attacks the queen. And now the queen has to go to d6 or d8. I'm assuming he's going to put the queen on d8. So let's see. All right. Queen to d6 was played. I'm trying to fork him on c7, but the queen is there. Are there any ways to remove the guard? That's the question. The good thing is, he's no longer able to play d6. I think I'm winning now. I want to play h4, and then if he takes, my rook is active. If he decides not to take, then I get a pass pawn. And again, I'm not worried about my queen getting trapped. This bishop is no longer going to be getting developed. Let's just play pawn to h4. This is just winning. This has to be winning. I'm just slightly scared because my king is not safe. But apart from this, this has to just be winning. And if he takes a knight, okay, he did take. Now the rook is going to take. So we could confidently say, with confidence, the only piece that I have that is not partaking in the game is my rook on a1. How are we going to get that rook in the game? I can't tell you guys. Maybe if he takes and I play king takes, then I'm going to be able to swing this rook over to h1. Maybe I should play king e2, swing the rook over to h1. I don't want to waste too much time, though. That's the thing. But this is just bad for black. Okay, pawn to b5. Pawn to b5 is a sensible move. Because he's trying to develop the bishop and castle. That's what we don't want him to do. Is it time to take on f7? on f8, if I take on f8, rook takes f8, queen g6 check. And if the rook blocks, there's rook h7. And if the king moves, there's rook h7. I think it's time. I think it's time. I want to play knight g3 to f5 as well. Like knight g3 develops the bishop, hit him with c3. Nah, I want to do it, but let's just take. Do not be releasing the tension. Like, to take is still a mistake. I'm just doing this because I'm ahead by a pawn, and I'm afraid that once he castles his king, my queen is going to be getting trapped. But to take is still a mistake. And taking on f8 is probably a mistake. So rook takes was played. Okay, the queen is obviously under attack, so we have to move. Let's play queen to g6 with check. That was the plan. Now he lost the right to castle, because if he plays rook to f7, there's rook to h7. So he moves the king, and the king is also just not going to be escaping. I like my position. But how do we make even more progress? Because bishop to b7 is coming. Okay, what are we going to do here? But let's try knight g3. Let's try knight g3 to f5. I don't want his knight here though. So after bishop b7, I may play knight e3. Come on, don't mess this up. No, don't mess this up. I should want to trade. What if I play pawn c3, hit the knight? If the knight moves, there's knight f5. Pawn c3 hits the knight. If the bishop takes, we take the knight. The bishop is under attack, but then there's bishop f7. And if knight e3, there's pawn c5. Hit queen takes, queen has to move. Knight f5 doesn't even do anything though. It doesn't even do anything. All right, how do we do this? Rook, man, I needed to get that rook in the game. Pawn c3, bishop takes, bishop f7, hits queen. Oh, no, that doesn't work. That doesn't work though. I think I just made an inaccurate move, and I have no time on the clock. I have to play fast. I think I need to start neutralizing his pieces. Maybe pawn c4. God, pawn c4 is so risky, but we have to do it. My king is now not safe. His knight is very strong on d5. I need to just trade my king. This is the weakest king. Like, his king is weak, but at least he has some pieces defending his king. All he needs to do here is just take stakes and maybe queen here, or just try to find some ways to get access to attacking my king. And we also have to play fast, so this is weird. But if I could just trade the queens off the board, that would be nice. Maybe I should just run my king all the way over to h1. I just run. Okay, bishop takes. How do we recapture? Maybe with the e-pawn so the knight gets the e4 square. Take with the e-pawn, takes, maybe rook to b8, knight e4 hits the queen. Take with the c-pawn, pawn. Okay, let's take with the e-pawn so that way I'm able to play knight e4. Hit the queen, but his knight is just too strong on d4 though, that's the thing. And then he played king to c7. The guy's, all of a sudden, he's playing so strong. All right, let's take here first. Let's take on b5. So that way my rook on a1 can join the game. Oh, but then he has queen. Okay, I have to just try to trade the queens off the board. Let's go queen e4. Like, the attack is going to be brutal. If he takes, I takes, and if knight takes, I takes, and I'm still ahead by a pawn. I don't think I'm losing, but I just have to be so careful, and I do not have enough time on the clock. But I would like to play an endgame here. Thank you, sir. We're in an endgame. If he takes this pawn, I take this pawn. If he protects this pawn, I protect this pawn. And okay, so he protected this pawn. Check doesn't do much. Let's guard the pawn first. Now I just need to get this rook in the game. If king up, I'm fort. So how am I going to get the rook in the game? Okay, rook up prevents my checks. How do we get this rook in the game? How do we get this rook in the game? Oh, king over loses. Oh, that was the plan. Let's go rook c1. Rook is on the same line as his king, which means pawn b4 followed by pawn takes c5 is a threat. So I'm assuming he's going to move his king, and then once he... Oh, if he moves the king, he loses this pawn. And if knight b3, we play pawn rook to c3. Like my position. Like my position. So he moves the rook to protect the pawn, hit him with b4, because we must put pressure on pin pieces. I think this is me winning another pawn, by the way. Like, for some reason, I'm not going to lie to you guys. Like, if a piece is on your half of the board and it's not really doing anything, it's not as dangerous. But I'm just not comfortable with a piece on my half of the board. That's the thing. So pawn to f5, very good move, by the way. If I take c takes, I takes king takes, I'm losing. If knight g4, rook g7, sack the rook takes, and then my rook is under attack. So I'm losing. Oh, okay, I have to play fast though. Let's just pull the knight back. Sure, I had something there. Now he's able to play king up. If king up, am I able to check? I'm probably just going to do it. Okay, check, takes, and then take this pawn. My rooks are just not coordinated. That's the issue here. Okay, I have to just play fast. 2 minutes. I have 2 minutes on the clock. Okay, he moves his rook. He's attacking this pawn. Pawn g3 to guard it. Now we take after f4. This is actually very good for black. Let's take with check. And if king takes, let's take here. That's a trick, by the way. Oh, he fell for the trick. Thank you, God. Knight e4 is a 4. Something crazy was about to happen to me. And my opponent resigns. More bishops opening against 2,000 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 2,000. We're playing more bishops opening. e5 was played. Let's hit him with bishop c4. What will we see? we saw our favorite move. Let's hit him with d4. Okay, that's nice. If he takes with the knight, we take on e5. If he takes with the pawn, we play knight f3. Everything is fine so far. We know exactly what's happening so far. The plan is to castle our king so that way we could start an attack on his king. Knight c6 was played. Let's just get the king out the center of the board. So my king is castled, his king is not. Which means my goal from here is to keep that king in the center, but he played bishop to c5, so that's going to be very hard for us. Let's play pawn to c3. This was our whole idea. Once they take, we take with the knight. He's ahead by a pawn, but we have a lead in development. This is what we've been playing the whole time. From here, I'm expecting pawn to d6. Okay, castling the king is also one option. But now I'm just going to develop my bishop, pin the knight to the queen, and I'm expecting him to pull the bishop back to e7. Like, not only is it a logic... This is crazy. The guy played d6. Bro, I'm pinning your knight. As a 2,000 rated player, this is very tricky. Because the guy's knight is pinned. What do we do to pin pieces? We PP on the PP. Down by a pawn, but the guy's king is going to be massively weak. Massively weak. Like my position. It's not completely winning though. Like if he plays bishop to g4, I'm not going to lie. It's going to be hard for me. Or king to h8. He's basically preparing himself. He's bracing himself to well, if I takes bishop h6, hit the rook moves, I take on f7, hit the rook again. Rook can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here. Only square for the rook is g4 though. And if rook g4, okay, but then if rook g4, okay, there is rook g4. Does that mean I should play pawn h3? I mean, pawn h3 is a logical move, but he's definitely going to play bishop e6 next. Maybe I should even play bishop f6 here, or queen d2. Okay, how is this not working? Takes, hit the rook move, takes, rook here. How do I not have anything there? Okay, let's just play queen to d2. Let's play queen to d2, which means the plan from here is to take the knight and then play queen h6, and he's not going to have a good way to defend f6, but I'm assuming the reason why he played king to h8 was to play rook to g8, so that is that. Oh, I blundered. Come on, bro. Come on. Knight takes e4. No, I'm just done by 2 pawns. If I take his queen, he takes my queen. Come on. I blundered, man. Okay, this is just losing. This is outright losing. If I take his knight, he takes my bishop. Okay, let's do this. Let's take his knight. He takes my bishop, and then I take his pawn. Attack the rook. Let's take the pawn, attack the rook. He's ahead by a pawn. And then once the rook... Oh, I can't take on f7. Because if I take on f7, there's... Okay, I need to calm down. Because I'm not playing very well. I was completely winning. Don't know why he's thinking he has to play rook to b8. If I take, there's rook here. And that's a fork. Oh my lord. So he moves the rook. All right, let's just play rook to e. Let's just play rook to e1. It's not too bad, you know. Okay, what can I say to give myself some pep talk here? Knight to e5 hits the unprotected bishop. All right, we can't trade. We're down by a pawn. We can't trade. Let's just pull the bishop back. I'm gonna try to play a bit fast, so that way, worst case scenario, we'll flag him. But if I play like Stockfish, if my next 12 to 15 moves is a move that Stockfish would play, I should still be able to win this. So I'm gonna be playing like Stockfish. Let's play like Stockfish here. Okay, bishop to d7. Maybe knight to e4, hit the bishop. Pawn to a3 followed by pawn to b4 is an idea. If I play knight e4, hit the bishop, there is bishop to b4. I think he wants to play bishop to c6, so I need to get my knight out of there. Bishop to c6 followed by pawn to a6 is good for him. And if I get my knight out of there, there's bishop c6. Okay, let's play pawn to a3. Bishop to c6, there should at least be knight to b5. Remember that I have to play a bit fast, because if you're losing, you have to find some other ways to try to win. Bishop c6, knight b3, hit the bishop. Pawn a6 traps my knight. Rook to d1, pawn to d5, take the bishop. Okay, I'm trying to be strong here. Bishop went back to b3. I'm going to quickly play knight to d5 and attack the bishop. Bishops are better than knights, so I don't want to trade though. That's the thing. But then if I takes it, doubles up his pawn. If you have isolated double pawns, that counts as one pawn. Akeem Brown 2025. Okay, bishop to d4. Bishop to d4. Bishop to d4. Oh, I'm losing. If rook b1, bishop f5. Wait, what? Rook b1, bishop f5, knight e4. All right, let's just do it quickly. Let's just play quickly, so that way he thinks I have something. So knight g4 was played. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, 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 ay. f2 is now hanging. So if I play knight e4, he plays f5, and that's a removing the guard tactic. If f5, h3 takes. Bishop takes, bishop f5, and I'm losing. Oh, God damn. Okay, if rook to e2, bishop to b5, and I'm losing. Have to play this. I just have to do it. And then takes, and I have a weak pawn. And my time is also low. Yo, it happens, you know. If you have a winning position, don't be fancy. You know, this is gonna happen to you, but I'm trying here. I'm trying. Okay, I have 10 seconds higher than him. Okay, knight takes. Let's quickly take. Hit the bishop. Bishop has to move. He has the bishop here. Hit him with knight c4 very quickly. Hit the bishop. And there's no and here. Maybe bishop back to c7 and then rook to d1 and all my pieces are active. I just have to not blunder anymore. I'm 400 points higher than this guy. He should be able to make a mistake. Bishop to f5 was played, hitting my rook. Let's play rook to d1 quickly. Now I have two pieces attacking d6 and this bishop is under attack. If he plays bishop to c5, pawn to b4, the bishop. Bishop back to c7, good move, good move. Hit him with pawn to e4. Hit the bishop. Bishop to g4 is a good move, by the way. I'm playing against a bishop here, guys. Like, playing against a bishop here is not for the weak. Bishop to e6 was played. Knight to e3. Okay, maybe he wants to trade, and then it's going to be opposite colored bishops. If it's opposite colored bishops, then I'm guaranteed a draw. And in a drawn position, I should be able to cheese him and win on time. With that being said, let's play rook to d2 with the idea of playing rook to d1 and apply pressure to d6. Pawn to b5. The guy said he doesn't want to draw. He wants to win. Okay, that's the only score for the night. Let's not overthink it. Bishop to b6 is a pin. I quickly get my king out of the pin. If bishop to a5, I play b4. If pawn to b4, then I play knight to d5. The fact that my rooks are like this, on the same diagonal like this, dangerous. Dangerous. Bishop to b6 is the move. That's definitely the move. If bishop to b6, we quickly play king to h1. And we're currently in the endgame, by the way, so the king doesn't belong there. I'm not gonna lie. I think the correct move is king f2 and then play king to f3. But I'm too scared to play that. Like, literally all my pieces are on dark squares. Okay, pawn to a5 was played. He just spared me one move. So let's play king up very quickly. Because king needs to be active. Knight d5 I really like though. Knight d5 if he takes, I take. Check. Okay. Let's play king up. Let's play king up. This may not be the correct move, but it's practical. It's a very practical move. Where in the end game, the king needs to be active. Now if he plays bishop to b6, it's not as scary because I'm able... Okay, that was the move I didn't like though. If I takes, rook takes is very good for him. Oh my lord. Okay, let's play pawn to a4 then. Pawn to a4 because we don't want his rook to be active. If bishop to b3, I play bishop to b5 and guard my pawn. If he plays pawn to b3, I report him for cheating. No, I mean, oh yes, definitely reporting him. Pawn to b3 threatens rook to b4 and hit both of my pawns. How do I react to that? Pawn to b3, king to f3, rook to b4, bishop to b5. My pawns are safe. The guy has 3 minutes on the clock. Let's keep up the pressure. He's nervous. Okay, this is not as dangerous. We spoke about this. Let's not waste time. King goes to f3. All right. Okay, if bishop to b3, we quickly play bishop to b5. Okay. I mean, I don't know what to think. Let's just take here. I just wasn't expecting him to give up his bishop for a knight. The good thing is, oh no, pawn d5. Okay, this is... There's no way in which black can lose this game. That's the issue. That's the issue. So pawn to e5. Let's play pawn to e5. I think if I want to draw, I should take. But let's play e5. And if he push, I go here and I win the pawn. I don't know what my king is doing on f3. I mean, we're in the end game. I'm just following principles. If you follow principles, good things is going to happen. If pawn to d5, rook to... If pawn to d4, rook to d3, bishop to c4 wins the bishop. So if pawn to d4, I have to play rook to e1. And then he checks. Oh my lord. Okay, pawn to g5 did absolutely nothing. So I think we play rook here. I like the idea of playing rook to d4. Rook to d3, bishop to f5 takes. Let's play rook to d3 quickly. Let's do that. Then rook to d4, then bishop to b5. Just this guy pushing his pawns. Who teaches this guy to play chess? Now we play rook to d4. Both of our rooks are on dark squares. This is important. If you're playing against a light squared bishop, put your pieces on dark squares and you never have to worry about that light squared bishop anymore. So he plays king up, check I'm not afraid of, check I'm not afraid of. We need to activate this bishop. I'm going to hit him with bishop to b5. The plan is to play bishop to c6 and attack the weak pawns in the endgame. Okay, we have like 40 seconds more than him. Like, should not lose. Oh my lord, that was a good move. I should have took the open file. Okay, bishop to a6 does absolutely nothing. It hits the rook. And unless he plays rook to c7, I'm going to be able to play bishop to b7 and then take this pawn. So he needs to play rook to c7 now. It's just a matter of speed. Like, I can't always play good chess. Like, I'm sorry. Sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. You have a losing position. You create some threats. You play fast. You win on time. It's a part of the game. You know, I'm actually going to win this game. You know why I know I'm going to win this game? He has a minute on the clock. So he's playing very well, by the way. Apart from these pawn moves that he was playing, did absolutely nothing. But we're about to start seeing a lot of blunders because of the time pressure. Okay, I have a plan. Look at this plan. It starts with king to f3. No, king to f2. I'm going to play bishop to e2 followed by... Guy's now playing fast. I don't want him to play fast. I should be the only one playing fast. Okay, bishop to d3 check does absolutely nothing. It checks the king. I just want him to think. The plan is to play bishop to e2 followed by bishop to f3. He's thinking. That's a pawn, bro. Takes, bishop takes. Oh, but then he checks. He's gonna check. Okay, bishop back to e2. He's gonna play bishop e4 and blunder his bishop. I'm gonna take the bishop and then take the rook. Watch this. I told you, if you have someone in time pressure, my coach used to tell me, if you're in time pressure, your strength cuts in half. Half. So I'm actually not playing a 2000 rated player anymore. I'm playing someone who is rated 1000. He has 50 seconds on the clock. Rook to d7 was played. Okay, that's a free pawn. Can't do anything about that. Let's give a check on d6. If he plays king up, we grab this pawn. And then it's just a trade. Now I'm just winning. Wow, that was crazy though. Okay, I'm going to checkmate him. If I play pawn to g4, it's not a checkmate. No. Come on, bro. Play some chess. This is over. Pawn. I wanted to play king to e3 followed by pawn to g4. But now I notice, well, that's also a free pawn. But if I play pawn to g4, the king has to go to f4. And then I play rook to f6. It's not mate though, but he has to block with the rook. And then I take the rook, and that's going to be a checkmate. Peak chess strength. Peak chess strength. You can't play good chess every day. You can't play good chess every day. King to f4, rook to f6, rook block, and that's mate. So he moves the king. We check on f6. He's crying. He's sending me crying emoji in the chat. He blocks with the rook, and that's just a checkmate.